Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 5 of the series. Chapter 69, Chapter 69, Chapter 68, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 14_1. Chapter 69, Chapter 68, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 14_1. Amidst the sound of the alarm, Fu Qian could sense people rushing over from all directions, swiftly sealing off the small courtyard without leaving any gaps. Under these circumstances, he was left without a plausible explanation. But the good thing was that Fu Qian never liked to explain. So, without looking back, he stood with his hands behind his back, feigning an upward gaze at the starry sky. Who are you? Why would you commit such a heinous act? Behind him came the furious roar of Huang Leiji, and one could almost imagine his face contorted with rage. Pretty impressive, the timing was impeccable. To kill the person before his own arrival and then flee before he got there, subsequently, the Huang family would find the anomaly and encircle him, making him the scapegoat. If the timing had been off by even a slight bit, it would lead to a disastrous outcome. A truly daring move, to snatch chestnuts out of the fire, was this evil omen leaping out of its own skin. Given the current situation, the Huang family was definitely not going to let things go so easily. The person who had just called out was Huang Leiji. From the breath, he could distinguish that Huang Lezhan and Huang Jianyuan were also present. Moreover, being deep in the estate, fighting his way out would be quite difficult and also time-consuming. Regardless of whether he went on a killing spree or got caught up here, it was exactly what Evil Omen would want to see. The situation was highly unfavorable. Fortunately, he had a contingency plan in place. You ask me who I am? Fu Qian snorted and slowly turned around. In the short moment before, his facial features had already swiftly shifted back to his own. Fu Qian, Night Watchman Special Operations Consultant. Night Watchman. As he spoke, a crowd of people looked at him with both shock and doubt, scrutinizing his unfamiliar face. How come I am not aware of this title of a Special Operations Consultant within the Night Watchman? Of course, Huang Leiji was not so easily fooled and immediately furrowed his brows to express his skepticism. And how did you get into the Huang estate? Why do you think you should be aware of the affairs of the Night Watchman? Fu Qian did not answer his question at all, not even glancing in his direction, instead turning his gaze back inside the house. Evil Omen. You're saying that Evil Omen did this? Huang Leiji was taken aback, surveying the bloody scene inside the house. What else? Me. Fu Qian let out a cold laugh. So the Huang family is aware of Evil Omen. And here I thought Shi Yuan's foremost clan had become oblivious to matters beyond their windows. Huang Leiji's old face turned red. We just became aware of the situation with Evil Omen, and there hasn't been time to contact the Night Watchman. Don't trouble yourself with the journey, we've come to you instead. Fu Qian looked at the scene inside the house. I and Su Jiyan split up to pursue Evil Omen. I received a message that your uncle was the next target and rushed over, but it seems I was a step too late. Su Jiyan. After a moment of contemplation, Huang Leiji signaled to someone beside him, then took a step forward. Mr. Fu, I never imagined that Evil Omen would be so vicious as to infiltrate our Huang estate and commit such an atrocity. I've already sent someone to fetch Su Jiyan. Perhaps we should wait for her to arrive. While speaking, Huang Leiji observed Fu Qian's reaction closely. All right, let's wait for Su Gao to come and discuss further. Fu Qian nodded slightly and pointed inside the courtyard. Secure this area. Don't let anyone touch anything inside. Also, compile a report of all the recent movements over the past month of every transcendent member of the Huang family for me. What do you mean by this? Huang Leiji's gaze sharpened, and before he could speak, Huang Jianyuan behind him couldn't hold back anymore. Why does Mr. Fu need to investigate this? Could it be that he suspects someone from the Huang family? It's not suspicion, but confirmation. Fu Qian shot him a cold glance without saying a word. Provoked by Fu Qian's stare, Huang Jianyuan instinctively stepped back, realizing his reaction. His face instantly reddened, and a hint of hatred flashed in his eyes. Jianyuan. Prepare what Mr. Fu has requested. Huang Leiji placed his hand on his son's shoulder, his gaze sternly stopping him. This guy can't run away. Give him whatever he wants. If the night watchman proves later that this guy is just grandstanding, there'll be plenty of opportunities to crush him to dust. Indeed, he had just returned to Shiyuan. Fu Qian flipped through the documents handed over by Huang Jianyuan, which contained the recent travel records of every member of the Huang family. And, as expected, upon reaching Huang Yuanchang's column, Fu Qian found he too had returned to Shiyuan just in the past week. The suspicion grew. But why did he look so familiar? The itinerary had photographs attached next to each person's entry, as per his request. Fu Qian looked at Huang Yuanchang's face and faintly felt he had seen it somewhere before. It was a feeling both familiar and strange, as if it fell on some cognitive blind spot. There weren't many transcendents in Shiyuan City, so he shouldn't have this feeling. Fu Qian's brain raced, replaying every scene in Shiyuan City since his arrival. Wait a second, it's here. Fu Qian's memory suddenly froze on a particular scene. It was after he had disguised himself as Huang Jianyuan to enter the Huang family estate. In order not to be discovered, he had proceeded quickly with a superior air, not responding to anyone. In the process, he brushed past several people, and now the face of one of them seemed particularly vague in his memory. This wasn't normal. Could this also be an effect of survival instinct? Huang Yuanchang had indeed run off. Impressive, not overlooking any blind spot to seduce and mislead. But that didn't matter. Fu Qian strained his memory cells, gradually clarifying that blurry moment. Good, he had memorized the scent. Su Gao arrived even faster than expected. Still in black with a narrow cap, her sword was ever present. Her expressionless face, paired with the fractured scars, resembled a broken doll. However, the moment she appeared, nearly everyone's breathing grew faintly lighter. Indeed, it's Evil Omen's style. Stepping into the blood-soaked room, Su Gao made her judgment in just 10 seconds, speaking to Huang Leiji. The next moment, sensing something, she lifted her head to look at Fu Qian sitting to the side, and her body halted. That instant, dozens of gazes patrolled between the two of them. Fu Qian winked at her. Without asking, Su Gao's reaction clearly indicated that Huang Leiji hadn't informed her about this colleague of hers. Unfortunately, old Master Huang didn't understand that this didn't matter at all. Mr. Fu is also here. After locking eyes with Fu Qian for a few seconds, Su Gao gently bowed, her gaze fleetingly vivacious. Long time no see. It's really great that you're safe. Thank you for your concern, just call me Fu Qian. Yes. Su Gao nodded her head. Did you come to Shiyuan this time for the Evil Omen matter? Yes. That's great. Su Gao's lips curled up slightly, as if smiling. There was definitely a problem. From the sound of it, the two hadn't seen each other for a long time, that Mr. Fu was just spouting nonsense earlier. Executioner Yen, this Mr. Fu says he is the Night Watchman Special Operations Consultant. Huang Leiji's face turned ashen, interrupting the conversation between the two as if they were the only ones there. Mr. Fu said that, did he? Yes, and moreover, when we arrived just now, only Mr. Fu was present at the scene, which is highly suspicious. Yes, Mr. Fu is the Night Watchman Special Operations Consultant. Su Gao's eyes still on Fu Qian, she stated flatly. Chapter 70, Chapter 70, Chapter 69, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 15_1. Chapter 70, Chapter 69, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 15_1. This. Su Gao's words had a group of people looking at each other in dismay, at a loss for words. Huang Leiji was even more frustrated, as the latter half of his sentence was stifled before he could finish it, leaving him feeling aggrieved. He also said he had an agreement with you to act separately. Exactly, we are currently operating separately to chase down Evil Omen. You're trying to fool ghosts. Even a fool could see that you haven't seen each other for a long time, and you don't even seem to be very familiar with each other. How could there possibly be any joint chase plan? This Mr. Fu clearly has a dubious identity, yet Su Gao had without a word appointed him a role. Mr. Fu even suspects that Evil Omen is hiding within our Huang family. Huang Leiji declared coldly. Really? Su Gao's eyes finally turned sharp, scanning around. If Mr. Fu feels this way, there must be a reason for it. Huang Leiji no longer had anything to say. Although he didn't know why, it was clear that Sugao decidedly protected the young man without conditions. It seemed that even if this Fu Qian claimed to be evil omen, Executioner Yen would probably just cut him down directly. But to just let it go like this was something Huang Leiji was not willing to stomach, so he redirected his spearhead toward Fu Qian. Mr. Fu, may I know how you had confirmed that evil omen's target was a member of the Huang family? Even to the extent of identifying my uncle. Professional skill, how else would I be an action consultant? Faced with Huang Leiji's questioning, Fu Qian chuckled and said a sentence that made everyone's hair stand on end. What's more, I have also confirmed that evil omen's next target is still a member of the Huang family. Still a member of the Huang family. The surrounding people were instantly horrified. As aristocratic families accustomed to peace, they had never thought that evil omen could pose any threat to them. Unfortunately, the scene before them had shattered this false sense of security, and Fu Qian's words brought a fear that was almost tangible. Mr. Fu. Huang Leiji was also stunned for a long while, and had just taken a deep breath to speak when. It's about time. To their surprise, Fu Qian stood up at this moment, nodded to Sugao, and walked straight towards the door, ignoring the encirclement ahead of him. Sugao followed him without a word. The people in front instinctively took a step back. No matter what, this was the night watchman, and they surely couldn't really stop them, right? What it meant to lay hands on the night watchman was clear to everyone. The aristocratic families that had been destroyed in history for this reason were far from few. And so, the group almost automatically cleared a path, watching the two figures depart with their eyes wide. Father, what shall we do next? After a moment of lost contemplation, Wang Jianyuan approached, looking pale as he spoke to his father. Huang Leiji's expression was undeniably very ugly. They definitely couldn't do anything to this man of unknown origin today. At the same time, he intuitively didn't want to believe what Fu Qian had said. But whether he was willing to believe it or not, the brutal scene before his eyes was very real. If left unchecked, and something similar happened again. Send out a notice to have everyone return, reinforce the security of the estate. Without my approval, nobody is allowed to leave during this time. Huang Leiji gritted his teeth and said, I've not had the opportunity to thank you for the last incident. After leaving the Huang family estate, Sugao stopped and looked at Fu Qian, speaking earnestly. In fact, you've already thanked me. Fu Qian chuckled inwardly, curbing Sugao's urge to thank him again and handed her a piece of paper. It was one of the documents provided by the Huang family, with Huang Yuanchang's information already marked by him. Explaining would be quite cumbersome, but it's preliminarily confirmed that he is the true identity behind evil omen. Oh. Sugao's eyes lit up upon hearing this and she earnestly reviewed the material. Since she took on this task, she had been tracking evil omen and had several opportunities, but each time they slipped through her fingers, and up until now, the information she obtained was scanty. Mr. Fu had actually found the person. After this guy killed someone at the Huang family, he has fled from there and should now be lurking in Shiyuan City, looking for his next target. Another point that can be confirmed is that after he finished killing at the Huang family, his series of brutal sacrificial acts has entered its final stage. With just a few sacrifices remaining, he can fulfill his goal, which is likely to be some kind of widespread disaster. In short, we don't have much time left. Fu Qian quickly briefed Sugao on his findings while she listened silently with intense seriousness. But it's not entirely without opportunity. Evil omen's whereabouts are indeed elusive, but one thing is clear, his targets are always transcendents. I deliberately said that evil omen's next target is still a member of the Huang family just now to scare them a bit. There weren't many transcendents to begin with in Shiyuan. After the Huang family strengthens its vigilance, evil omen's choice of targets will become even more limited, so next we'll split up into two groups. Pulling from the memory in his mind, Fu Qian casually sketched a rough map. 2 areas, we or each look for 1 line to pursue. According to my estimate, for transcendence below the middle tier, he still needs to sacrifice at least 5 more to ultimately complete the ceremony. If we can lock onto his location before that, we'll certainly have a chance. Understood. Sugao readily agreed to the arrangement without any objections, not even asking how Fu Qian knew this. She wasn't one to trust others easily, but her previous experiences instilled in her a near-blind faith in Fu Qian. The mysterious expert who suddenly appeared with unbelievable intuition led the team to accomplish an almost impossible task, giving meaning to her own killing spree. Otherwise, she might never come to terms with those memories. Mr. Fu, please take care. Taking the route map sketched by Fu Qian, Sugao gave a deep bow, then without hesitation, turned and left. It has begun. Watching Sugao walk away, Fu Qian didn't waste any more time and commenced his own actions. Now, in the tiny Shiyuan city, Evil Omen would have to deal with 2 hunters. Truth be told, Fu Qian was almost certain Sugao wouldn't find the person. If the speculation that Evil Omen received shelter was correct, then Sugao would undoubtedly pose a greater threat than himself. The protection Evil Omen got would indeed take Sugao more seriously, leading him to avoid her search as much as possible. And the significance of sending Sugao to search was to increase the chances of him, a slightly weaker threat, to find Evil Omen. Perhaps some might ask, why not tell the Huang family people the truth and involve them in the manhunt, further suppressing Evil Omen's activities? The reason is simple: Fu Qian didn't think they could pose a threat to Evil Omen. Instead, it might complicate matters. Better to scare them, make them hunker down at home on the defensive. You can't win a game if you keep feeding the enemy. Chapter 71, Chapter 71, Chapter 70, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 16_1. Chapter 71, Chapter 70, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 16_1. In the outskirts of Shiyuan City, within a certain mansion. Boom. With a loud noise, Fu Qian abruptly stopped his body, dodging the incoming shock wave. The next moment, a straight gorge appeared under his feet, deep enough to reach half a person's height. The high-grade wooden floor of the mansion's living room had changed beyond recognition in the blink of an eye. Evil Omen. I've been waiting for you for a long time. A roar full of vigor came from ahead. It won't be that easy to kill me. This one still had plenty of spirit. Fu Qian felt a sense of relief. This was the 7th target he had been searching for on his way, a certain 8th phase transcendent. As he had expected, Evil Omen hadn't wasted any time. Since leaving the Huang family, taking advantage of this brief time difference, Evil Omen had almost been on a relentless killing spree in Shiyuan City, with a frighteningly high efficiency. Along the way, he had already encountered several corpses lying where they fell. Key point being that these transcendents, like animals in the forest, had a tacit understanding to maintain distance from each other when choosing their residences. This resulted in them being scattered sporadically across all areas of Shiyuan City. Following the planned route all the way here had indeed taken him quite a bit of time. Speed is essence in warfare. After confirming this person was okay, Fu Qian didn't even stop to speak and turned around to leave. However, the next moment, the heavy thud of something landing was heard, and all the doors and windows of the house were sealed by thick steel plates that had fallen. Booming laughter came from behind him. Now that you're here, it won't be so easy to leave. Your will to live is quite strong, huh? Fu Qian looked at the tightly sealed steel plates and silently praised in his mind. Obviously, such things could not be installed in a short period of time. It was likely that this fellow had prepared these security measures for himself, not specifically for Evil Omen. Admirable courage indeed, not only to be well prepared in advance but even brave enough to defend and counterattack. At this moment, the roaring sound behind him started up again, the ground beneath his feet collapsing like quicksand. After making another slanting leap, Fu Qian looked back at the 7th-8th phase brother. The dark complexion, the exaggerated pectoral muscles, the deformed vest strained by his back. This must be the legendary figure with the height and waist both of 8 feet. For a moment, he almost thought Captain Gu had ascended. Now that 8th phase brother had a ferocious smile on his face. In his right hand, he was holding a hammer that seemed extremely heavy, which greatly complemented his build. Every time that hammer struck the ground, the tremendous force was transmitted into the earth, creating a long ravine. He looked dominating indeed, but buddy, better pray there's nothing like optical cables under your feet. Are you satisfied with this place? 8th phase brother had a smug look on his face, continuously knocking the hammer on the floor, making the whole house tremble. I don't care if you're a transcendent killer or not, this is my turf now. There was truth to his words. In such a confined environment, his strength-based abilities certainly had an advantage. The weapon in 8th phase brother's hand was obviously not ordinary and would likely pose a challenge even to standard 7th phases when used in combination. What number trap had Evil Omen set for himself this time? The survival instincts of this person were truly miraculous. Every time it felt like he was about to catch up, the traces left by him would lead to a place like this. There would often be traps like these, originally intended for him, which would slightly delay the pursuer. Seeing that Fu Qian made no sound, Eighth Phase brother snorted coldly and stopped talking. He lifted the heavy hammer high above his head and then smashed it down forcefully, tearing open an even larger gorge with the loud noise. Simultaneously, he charged along the split ravine, hammer in hand, aggressively coming toward him. Facing this fierce attack, Fu Qian showed no intention of dodging at all. As the Eighth Phase brother's cart was halfway there, and he was swinging the heavy hammer towards himself, his right arm burst forth, launching a punch. Mid-punch, his arm abruptly grew half a length and grabbed the opponent's thick neck, then slammed them against the wall. The momentum of the Eighth Phase brother, combined with the force of his swing, shook the entire room, and he was slammed against the wall with substantial force. Clang! The hammer crashed to the ground, creating a crater upon impact. Get it? 3 seconds later, Fu Qian looked into the Eighth Phase brother's bell-like eyes. I get it. Under Fu Qian's demonic grip, the Eighth Phase brother's neck was nearly crushed, his face turning beet red as he nodded frantically. The fact that the other party had caught but not killed him was proof enough that he wasn't the lunatic evil omen, he had mistaken his target. Open the door. Yes, of course. The Eighth Phase brother was quick to catch on, not daring to say an extra word. Struggling, he fumbled around himself and found the control switch. Amidst a rumbling noise, the steel plate outside the house slowly lifted up. Fu Qian threw the men to the ground and leaped out in a single step. Before leaving, he gave the steel plate a particular glance. That steel plate must be 2 centimeters thick. How scared of dying are you? There was a slight delay, but it wasn't a big problem. Fu Qian determined his direction and quickly reviewed the map in his mind. Even with an animal-like instinct for danger, killing always requires time. Even with such minor disruptions, Fu Qian was still very sure that he was getting closer to Evil Omen. Most importantly, the transcendents of Shiyuan City were generally of average strength, mostly around the 8th or 9th phase. Evil Omen would likely need several more people to complete the sacrifice. Following the trace, Fu Qian soon arrived at his next target's location. This person clearly did not have the crisis awareness of the 8th phase brother and was dead beyond any doubt. The bedclothes were drenched in blood, and not only was the body decapitated, but both eyeballs were also missing. From the traces at the scene, this person appeared to have been killed directly in their sleep. Speaking of which, Fu Qian found this rather strange. Almost every one of the transcendents that had been killed before was like this person, engaged in various activities at the time of death. Sleeping, bathing, even applying a facial mask, each was caught off guard and killed with a single blow. Evil Omen seemed to have dispatched them as easily as harvesting vegetables, the whole process seemingly taking no more than a minute. Once or twice might be understandable, but after several incidents, it's hard to explain away as coincidence. It appeared that Evil Omen's divine protection extended beyond just the instinct for danger. While mulling this over, Fu Qian didn't stop moving. He felt Evil Omen's presence growing clearer and clearer. Wait a second, Fu Qian furrowed his brow, recognizing the building not far away. A 3-story building with a red facade, where he had slept not too long ago. Evil Omen really had some guts to come straight to the Night Watchman base, huh? But indeed, the Night Watchman team of Shiyuan City truly was subpar. He hoped the 3 of them were together and hadn't succumbed too easily. Without hesitation, Fu Qian kicked open the front door, then saw a living room in disarray. Amidst the blood littering the floor, a figure sat in the middle of the hall, covered in wounds. Next to him stood a flesh tree, its swaying, broken limbs appearing to account for 3 people. You here? The figure let out a raspy laugh. I'm here. Fu Qian nodded and stepped into the room. Chapter 72, Chapter 72, Chapter 71, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 17_1. Chapter 72, Chapter 71, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 17_1. It really is you. Kid. Fu Qian looked at Huang Yuanchang, who sat on the ground. The distinctive lanky figure of the Huang family was unmistakable. However, it seemed he was still a step too late given the current situation. Who could have thought that 3 night watchmen, even inside the base, would be taken out so cleanly and efficiently? Even though Huang Yuanchang was covered in wounds, it was still recognizable that his aura wasn't that strong, at most it was of a 7th phase peak level. Yet it was such a person who not only slaughtered his way from the Huang family estate to the night watchman base, but also in a short span managed to kill 3 night watchmen so completely that they couldn't be deader than even pose them. Who knows if Huang Jianyuan and his people last time were played around with like this too. With Captain Qiao and his 2 men, Huang Yuanchang's sacrifice should now be complete. Fu Qian could distinctly feel that something was different. His intuition told him the failure notification for containment would appear very soon. He quickly decided to gather some more intel. Unfortunately for you, you're too late. Huang Yuanchang was sitting paralyzed in a pool of blood, staring at his work with an obsessed look, his expression manic. The final sacrifice has been completed, you shall witness my rebirth. After a swell of emotion, Huang Yuanchang turned to look at Fu Qian. You must be very curious about how I did all this, aren't you? Do you want to know why I could kill those people? Actually, it's quite simple, I can just see their death coming, that's all. Huang Yuanchang showed a fanatical smile. I am a follower of God, you can't see him, you can't even imagine his power. Sorry, but as a matter of fact, I have seen it, and quite clearly at that. Fu Qian thought to himself. Guided by his omnipresence, I just need to follow orders, leading these people to their destined demise. That's why they can't fight against me, because they can't escape the premonition of death. This guy's fanaticism is seriously off the charts, Fu Qian frowned. But this destined demise thing is somewhat interesting. Fu Qian thought about those transcendents who died frustrated deaths. What's that saying again? When people are killed, they die. It's not possible for someone to be on guard all the time, and according to this theory, as long as there is a possibility of being killed, Huang Yuanchang can see it under the guidance of that great existence, appearing at their most vulnerable, most relaxed moment, to reap their lives in any possible way. This logic is quite like a series of movies he had seen before. Even those 3 were no exception, it just required me to pay some price to present their destined demise. Huang Yuanchang caressed his wounds, grimacing in pain yet laughing maniacally. Do you know? This is also why you could never catch me, because I can not only see others' demise, but I can also see my own. You may be very strong, I can't even discern your level, but I just need to avoid those lines that would lead me to death, and then no one will ever be able to kill me. No matter what means you use, no matter what plans you make, do you understand? Huang Yuanchang's expression became even more delirious. Now that the final sacrifice is complete, you will have the honor of witnessing the great blessing he bestows upon his followers. I can feel it already. I can feel it too. Fu Qian nodded. This is no idle claim, since just now he had felt something very special taking shape within Huang Yuanchang's body. However, he wasn't as optimistic as the latter, he thought that thing didn't quite seem like a blessing. Continue speaking, I'm listening. Fu Qian had never really appreciated such verbose villains, but if they were on the opposite side from him, he was very much welcoming of it. In fact, he has been guiding me for many years. After his frenzied rant, Huang Yuanchang began to enter a phase of recalling the past. Before, I never understood what the voice I often heard was. Not until I attempted the first trial according to his demands. Then I received a gift beyond imagination. Unlike my other brothers and sisters, I inherited this ghostly appearance but not the talent for cultivation. Yet, he showed me what was possible. As I made more offerings, I also received more revelations, and ultimately he guided me back to Shiyuan, where I will complete the final step. And you will be the first witness. Huang Yuanchang once again raised his hands high, his voice excited to the point of shrillness, looking mad with fervor. Seeing this, Fu Qian quietly took a few steps back. The next moment, Huang Yuanchang's fervent expression froze, and his head swelled like a balloon and burst, raining down a mix of red and white. Strands of brilliant golden patterns dissipated outwards, interconnecting into a mysterious array that dazzled and bewildered anyone who glimpsed it. At the same time, Fu Qian's head jolted, as if connecting with some special existence. This feeling was exactly the same as the last time. Fu Qian was almost certain that the tree must have appeared again in the sky above. And within Shiyuan City, the number of idiots with collapsing consciousness was increasing exponentially. I said it might not be a blessing. Watching Huang Yuanchang's headless body slowly fall to the ground, Fu Qian sighed. This time he was more cautious. Even though he was inside a building, he still looked straight ahead without raising his head, minimizing the risk of losing SAN points. Soon, a prompt sounded in his ear, and the scene before him rapidly blurred. Calamity has descended, containment has failed. Current SAN points, 41. Do you want to play the event recap? This is quite tricky. In the warehouse, Fu Qian frowned. The person had been found, but the situation still seemed difficult to handle. To start with, this preordained death was really stubborn. With it present, everything could change at any moment, and no prior experience could be applied to the next time. The simplest example was that the previous hunting route before the evil omen had no reference value. As long as he made targeted adjustments that threatened the other's life, that person would also adjust his route in response. Based on his own actions, this thing would always calculate and generate an optimal solution. Not to mention his ability to foresee death, which almost allowed him to target anyone. Assume he intended to sacrifice 10 people, with the nearly 100 transcendents in Shiyuan City, the combinations that could be made were C100, 10, which was astronomical. No, there was also the issue of order. It should be A100, 10, even more astronomical. Doing tasks these days is really not easy, you even have to learn mathematics. In fact, Fu Qian didn't believe everything Huang Yuanchang said either. For one thing, judging from the latter's end, he was merely cannon fodder that had been exploited, and might not know everything. Secondly, just the destiny of death alone could not explain why Gung Yu's death was inconsistent twice. The situation is truly complicated. Or perhaps a violent resolution can be attempted. For instance, changing C100 to C10. Chapter 73, Chapter 73, Chapter 72, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 18_1. Chapter 73, Chapter 72, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 18_1. There is no such thing as the most violent, only more violent. When dealing with targets that can penetrate everything and take advantage of any opportunity. If peeling thread from silk doesn't work, then it would be a better choice to cut off the enemy's supply from the base. Without any hesitation, Fu Qian placed his hand on the mist gate in front of him. Consumed 1 SAN point to attempt containment again, current SAN points, 40. Skills, Air Bullet, Visceral Critical Strike, Cat School, Feast, Locked. Weapon, Tyrant's Fist. 1%, 16%, 21%, 29%, 41%, 61%, 98%, 100%, containment scene loading complete. Mr. Fu, your feast is ready. The familiar restaurant appeared before his eyes once more. In his perception, Gung Yu remained motionless in the corner, outside Lu Jun and another person stopped in their tracks, looking inside with confusion. Savoring the aroma of the food, Fu Qian stuffed a piece into his mouth, then immediately got up and walked out, brushing past Lu Jun and his companion as they entered to investigate. Who goes there? At the entrance of the Huang family estate, 2 guards watched warily as a figure flew towards them, shouting out their challenge. However, the target ignored them completely, sweeping past directly. The guards, shocked and pale, exchanged looks and quickly pressed a button, setting off a loud alarm. Without a moment's hesitation, Fu Qian charged straight in, heading directly for Old Master Huang's courtyard. And in his perception, the people summoned by the alarm were rapidly converging behind him. Clang! Fu Qian kicked the courtyard door open and was unsurprised to see the bloody scene inside. Indeed, the evil omen had acted even earlier this time. But that didn't matter, as he didn't come here to catch him. With his back to the courtyard door, Fu Qian stood still. Soon, the coming Huang family members had caught up and surrounded the courtyard completely. The horrific scene inside was so shocking that the group was filled with horror, and no one dared to advance. Who are you? Why commit such a heinous act? At last, Wang Leiji, anguished and with his hair standing in anger, cried out as he arrived on the scene. Fu Qian slowly turned around, his face hidden behind a smiling mask brought from the restaurant, causing Old Master Huang to start in astonishment. A vile miscreant, daring to commit murder but too cowardly to show your true face. My true face. Fu Qian let out a cold laugh, slowly removing the mask to reveal Huang Yuanchang's face. Yuanchang. It's actually you. All were shocked, and Huang Leiji was especially enraged. The Huang family has treated you well, why would you do such a thing? You see, as long as one wears a mask, there are few who question the authenticity of the face beneath. Treated me well, ha 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 ha. Fu Qian let out a string of desolate laughter. Are you referring to this deformed dignity, or even with this dignity, still having no cultivation talent? Should I be filled with gratitude? It is the Huang family who has wronged me, Huang Leiji. Fu Qian bellowed at the family head, addressing him by name. But all that is in the past, I have now received a gift you cannot even comprehend. Today is just the beginning. Within 3 days, I will make the entire Shiyuan City Huang family my sacrificial offering, each and every one of you. Fu Qian looked around coldly. We'll end up just like him. You dare to exterminate my Huang family members, such bold words. Do you really think you can leave here today? Huang Leiji laughed in furious disbelief. However, Fu Qian didn't pay him any heed. Having thrown down his harsh words, he burst into motion and took off running. The surrounding crowd was still in shock, and by the time they snapped out of it, it was too late to stop him. Stop right there. At that moment, a figure leaped over the crowd, chasing after him. Shrouded in bright yellow, it was none other than Huang Lejian, the number 1 person of the Huang family. 5th phase transcendents are not to be trifled with. Huang Lejian attacked with fury, his movements lightning fast as he threw a punch at Fu Qian's back, powerful as thunder. Fu Qian, still in midair, spun around as if his back had eyes, meeting Huang Lejian's fist with his right foot. At the same time, he rapidly tapped his fingers, releasing 5 whistling air bullets. Amidst the gusting wind and the heavy sound of their clash, Fu Qian used the rebounding force to leap up again. Huang Lejian wanted to pursue, but his expression changed drastically the next moment as he twisted his body to dodge several air bullets. However, the distance was too short, and his left arm was hit. His body shuddered, and he slanted downward. I'm fine. Pushing away those who came to assist him. Huang Lejian held his shoulder, looking at his elder brother. What do we do now? The latter's face was ashen, his brows furrowed deeply. This madman, our Huang family has actually bred such a traitor. Although I don't know how he got so strong, he actually said he would slaughter all of our Huang family members within 3 days. Our Huang family has stood for 100 years, no one, no matter who, has the right to make such grand claims. Huang Leiji snorted coldly, his gaze sinister. Notify the night watchman, say that an evil omen has appeared at the Huang family, has committed a bloodbath, and plans to kill everyone within 3 days. Also, have everyone outside return to the highest alert, no one is allowed to leave without my order. If Huang Yuanchang is spotted in the estate, exterminate without mercy. Fu Qian didn't hesitate before assuming the mantle of the murderer, threatening to wipe out the entire Huang family next, heading straight for the nearest transcendence abode. Kicking the door in, amidst screams, Fu Qian slapped the woman who jumped out of bed naked without a hint of politeness, sending her sprawling back onto the bed. Sleeping soundly in broad daylight. How can you sleep at a time like this? At your age, how can you be sleeping? And to top it off, sleeping naked. Don't you have the slightest sense of crisis? Looking at the woman bewildered by the slap, Fu Qian stepped forward. The next moment, lethal intent surged, and the bright glint of a blade filled his vision. So quick. Far from being alarmed, Fu Qian was delighted, retreating half a step sideways, narrowly avoiding the attack. A figure clad in black, Su Gao, landed softly, her curved sword unsheathed, her gaze calm as water. Always so reliable. Fu Qian looked at Su Gao with satisfaction. Based on his knowledge of Huang Leiji, he was sure Huang would consider seeking help from the night watchman. He had intentionally not concealed his tracks on the way there to lure Su Gao to follow him. The next moment, Fu Qian saw a glimmer of recognition in her eyes. You can recognize me even with a mask on. Su Gao remained silent, casting a glance at both Fu Qian and the woman on the bed. In the latter's terrified eyes, she casually flung her scabbard, hitting the woman's face solidly. The naked woman passed out without hesitation. Mr. Fu. Su Gao bowed in respect. I'm so relieved that you're unharmed. By sheer luck. Fu Qian removed his mask, admitting his identity as he had already adjusted his face back on the road. Seeing his face, Su Gao's perpetually unchanging expression momentarily became animated. Did you come here because of the evil omen? Yes. Fu Qian nodded. We don't have much time. I need your full cooperation for what's to come, or something far worse than before will happen here. An incident worse than the last. Su Gao's eyes sharpened as she slowly nodded her head. All right. Chapter 74, Chapter 74, Chapter 73, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 19_1. Chapter 74, Chapter 73, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 19_1. First, I need you to take her to the night watchman base. Fu Qian could feel Su Gao's trust in him and didn't hesitate, pointing at the woman who had fainted. After that, we split up and move as quickly as possible to gather all the transcendents not from the Huang family to that place. Fu Qian didn't stress whether they agreed or not, as he believed in Su Gao's style. Then, evil omen will automatically come to us. Understood. After carefully listening, Su Gao didn't ask any more questions and immediately wrapped the woman in a bedsheet, lifting her up. How important it was to have a reliable partner. Watching Su Gao disappear into the distance with the woman, Fu Qian's face reflected satisfaction. The groundwork for undermining began. Theoretically, evil omen's destined death was truly impregnable. No matter what strategy he employed, evil omen could always dodge all possibilities that could lead to its death. At the same time, it harvested the lives of other transcendents to complete the sacrifice. It was like reaching a certain endpoint with countless nodes and forks in the path, yet the protection evil omen received always allowed it to choose a perfect route. Where to go, whom to kill, then where to go next. It didn't even have to think, it simply moved on instinct. Truly untraceable, unrestrained as a wild horse. Like I said before, this thing is on the A110 order of magnitude. So, what if all these forks were blocked, leaving just one road in the middle? Gather all the potential sacrifice targets in one place, leaving only one node. The problem seems much simpler then. At the Huang family, after his own declaration of slaughter, Huang Yuanchang could no longer return, and Fu Qian didn't think that he, a seventh phase, had the capability to forcefully break through the Huang family estate on alert. Gathering the remaining transcendents at the night watchman base would leave him completely without options. Then, they just had to wait for him to show up. Unless he could withstand the desire to kill within, but unfortunately, from their last encounter, he was already half-mad and likely didn't have the patience. Of course, a more violent approach would be to simply clear out all the transcendents in Shiyuan City, which would undoubtedly be more effective. But for a preliminary attempt, there was no need to be so extreme, for the time being. On the other hand, if he chose to kill, Su Gao might not kill him, but it would be very difficult to get her help. He remembered vividly the scene where she had shattered his composure. Of course, if it proves to still be insufficient, then fully activating Shura mode will also be one of the next options. Boom. Evil omen, I've been waiting for you for a long. Returning to the 8th phase brother's mansion, a fierce tremor interrupted the full-throated roar midway as Fu Qian cut him off. Gathering strength, turning, stomping down. Confronting the approaching shockwave, Fu Qian didn't dodge this time but chose to meet it head-on. Rubble flew, the two forces meeting, the impact under his feet abruptly stopped. Simultaneously, Fu Qian didn't stop moving and was already rushing towards the 8th phase brother's face. The man hadn't even had time to lift his heavy hammer from the ground, shock frozen on his swarthy face. Hiss! Fu Qian's right forearm swelled by a few inches and he grabbed the giant man's neck again, hoisting him up and slamming him against the wall. Bang! The latter's head jerked back, a crisp thud resounding, the 8th phase brother's eyes rolled back and he fainted on the spot. The wall behind this man turned out to be made entirely of metal. Work's done. When Fu Qian carried in the last person to the night watchman base, the whole place fell silent. In a corner of the hall, Su Gao stood with her sword, silent, coldly observing everyone. By her side were 3 night watchmen who didn't dare even to breathe loudly. Meanwhile, in the center of the room, various men and women wore faces of shock, unable to understand what had happened. Most of them bore injuries, clearly evidence that Su Gao also preferred to communicate with physical language. They had wanted to ask what exactly was going on, but Su Gao's gaze had scared them into silence, and their anxiety grew even more. Now, seeing Fu Qian enter, the woman wrapped in a bedsheet screamed out loud. Even though they were all, in the broadest sense, superheroes, they lacked any dignity. Fu Qian, with a look of disdain, threw down the 8th phase brother, who rolled, protecting his head, nearly knocking himself out cold again. The latter, whose constitution was still quite robust, had woken up on the way here and had been pretending to be unconscious. Now, he could no longer feign it. Ladies and gentlemen. Fu Qian counted the number of people present. Aside from the 3 who had been decapitated on arrival, all the Linking freelancers were here. He was very satisfied with this outcome. At least, half of the experts present had already witnessed Su Gao's ferocity, and they shivered at his words. You all should recognize where you are, so I believe there's no need for any unnecessary worry. After all, coming here is like returning home. What everyone needs to do is very simple. From now on, all of you must stay here, not leaving this room until I give further notice. Fu Qian finished in one breath, and then looked around. Any questions? As soon as Fu Qian had finished speaking, a muscular arm trembled as it raised, and the voice of 8th phase brother shivered. Staying here and not eating is fine, but what if someone needs to use the restroom? Fu Qian gave him a cold glance. Ruminate. Mr. Fu. Seeing that all the transcendents had reluctantly accepted their fate, Su Gao quietly asked him. Are you sure the evil omen will definitely come? Don't worry, he'll definitely show up. Fu Qian remembered Huang Yuanchang's maniacal laughter. The man currently couldn't stop if he tried. The only thing he was curious about was the state in which this man would make his appearance. In fact, he was even a little excited about this. Of course, not about Huang Yuanchang, for this brother who largely followed his instincts, he had no interest. What excited him was the entity behind Huang Yuanchang. What kind of response would this high-order existence, beyond anyone's understanding, have to the situation at hand? Fu Qian quickly got his answer. Not even an hour later, the base's main gate was pushed open from the outside. Under the watchful eyes of many, Huang Yuanchang just walked in like that. At that moment, he was a far cry from his normally sleazy appearance, his whole body shrouded in mercury-colored mysterious symbols, exuding an indescribable majesty. This was quite interesting. Fu Qian watched with interest the anomaly on Huang Yuanchang's body. Apart from the color, it looked somewhat similar to the thing that had appeared after that guy's head had exploded last time. That thing had directly caused the calamity to descend, and his mission to fail. What special effect might this one have? Facing a room full of transcendents, Huang Yuanchang showed no fear, steadily making his way to the front. Today, all of you will die. Chapter 75, Chapter 75, Chapter 74, The Evil Omen Must Die, Final, _1. Chapter 75, Chapter 74, The Evil Omen Must Die, Final, _1. Huang Yuanchang's flashy entrance successfully ignited the transcendent's foul moods. Eating hot pot and singing at home, then suddenly being dragged here to be incarcerated, everyone was already simmering with rage. And now, an inexplicable fool emerges, turning incarceration into a death sentence. The transcendents from Shiyuan City, many of them recognize Huang Yuanchang and are aware of his murky background. Even if they don't recognize him, they have the basic discernment that comes from being out in the world. Despite his bizarre appearance, the aura Huang Yuanchang emanated was at most at the 7th phase. This was far inferior to the 2 murderous gods beside him. If I can't defeat the Night Watchman, can't I defeat you? For a moment, the hall was flooded with approval. What the hell are you? Dare to spout such nonsense here? Has the Huang family gone mad? Even if Huang Leiji came, he wouldn't dare make such a grandiose claim. Do you know where you are? Still so ignorant and unruly. Evil Omen was actually him. The 3 Night Watchmen's expressions were extremely complicated at this moment, especially Captain Qiao. He naturally recognized Huang Yuanchang and could not accept that the legendary Evil Omen actually came from Shiyuan City. He's really here. Su Gao's eyes, however, twinkled with light. Having pursued him all the way here, she was familiar with the aura of the Evil Omen. She almost instantly confirmed that Huang Yuanchang was the Evil Omen. Murderous intent surged within her, and Su Gao's hand instinctively reached for the hilt of her sword, but her arm was grabbed by Fu Qian. Wait a moment. As Fu Qian spoke, his gaze was fixed on Huang Yuanchang. Although puzzled, Su Gao subconsciously accepted his suggestion. She suppressed the urge to act and smoothly withdrew her arm. Hee hee. At this moment, Huang Yuanchang, the target of 1,000 fingers, showed no fear. Instead, he let out a string of mocking laughter. His laughter became the final straw that ignited the rage, causing several figures to spring into action impatiently. Leading the charge was a woman with delicate features, in her 30s, dressed elegantly without a hint of makeup. Fu Qian had some memory of her. If he remembered correctly, the last time he saw her, she had a facial mask on even in death. Sister Mask now moved as fast as lightning, her rapier striking like a venomous snake, aiming directly at the lower half of Huang Yuanchang's body. Her move was vicious, filled with the fury of being forced to go out without makeup. I am a follower of God, protected by the sacred laws. Facing this sharp attack, Huang Yuanchang stood his ground, hands raised, voicing something that sounded like a murmur in a dream. Just as Sister Mask's rapier was about to strike Huang Yuanchang at his root. Any offender will be sentenced to beheading. As Huang Yuanchang's voice grew increasingly shrill, Sister Mask's forward charge shook, and her complexion turned pale. A line of blood appeared on her neck. The next moment, Sister Mask's delicate head slid off her neck without any obstruction, rolling to one side, the look of horror still etched on her face. Her headless body continued to charge forward due to inertia, narrowly missing Huang Yuanchang's body, and the rapier plunged deep into the floor. Thud. Thud. The two transcendents who lagged a step behind Sister Mask witnessed the scene with horror. It was too late to call off their attacks, and without exception, they met the same fate. And three headless bodies suddenly lay in the hall. A deathly silence. The transcendents froze in place, stunned by this inconceivable event. Interesting. I couldn't see how he did it at all. Fu Qian silently analyzed the scene he had just witnessed. He was certain that aside from ranting, Huang Yuanchang had made no other move and didn't even have a weapon in his hands. The wounds on the necks of the three who died looked as if they had grown there naturally. Perhaps it wasn't him who did it after all. The image of that sinister giant tree emerged in Fu Qian's mind. Is this how you respond? All offenders will be sentenced to beheading. Does that mean anyone who approaches Huang Yuanchang will have their heads cut off by so-called divine laws? If you're so incredible, why didn't I see it before? Watching the increasingly bright mercury-like patterns on Huang Yuanchang's body, Fu Qian guessed that the cost to achieve this was probably high. Right now, it might be that the high-tier existence believes that purely relying on a predestined death, Huang Yuanchang no longer has the possibility to complete the sacrifice in his current state, which is why he received such a blessing. You, all must die. At this moment, Huang Yuanchang's expression became more ferocious as he stepped over the corpses on the ground. Die. Dodging several incoming distant attacks with ease, Huang Yuanchang let out a low roar. The transcendent closest to him instantly stiffened, then slumped to the ground, his head rolling to one side. Every person he killed was within a certain range of him. It seems the decapitation judgment is related to distance. I have to say, this decapitation technique, coupled with the godlike dodging brought by predestined death, is really sharp. Fu Qian's brain worked rapidly, and he had a plan in mind. It was now that Su Gao finally realized why Fu Qian had asked her to wait. The eerie scene before her also exceeded her understanding. But seeing the approaching evil omen, her eyes revealed a look of resolute determination. However, before she could act, she noticed Fu Qian charging out by her side. The wind howled, and several air bullets opened the way. Fu Qian's body turned into a shadow, heading straight for Huang Yuanchang's head. Facing this sharp attack, the latter revealed a grim smile, continuing to move without pause and swiftly dodging the range of the air bullet's attack. At the same time, with Fu Qian now close at hand, blood sprayed from his neck, and his head tumbled through the air. Su Gao was shaken to the core, staring at this scene in disbelief, her face turned pale, devoid of any color. But in the next moment, something happened that shocked everyone. Fu Qian's headless body not only didn't fall but instead moved even faster, closing the distance to Huang Yuanchang in an instant. He raised his right hand, which swelled into a claw, and firmly grasped the latter's head. You! Huang Yuanchang cried out in shock, no longer displaying his previous frenzy. Wondering why I'm not dead, are you? Fu Qian's voice came from his chest. For the execution of decapitation, you have to cut off my true head to work. Amidst the room full of stares as if looking at a monster, a new head slowly emerged from the severed neck of Fu Qian. Now, do you see predestined death? Crack. With a face full of despair, Wang Yuanchang's head was tightly clamped by Fu Qian's right hand, and blood splattered with white matter. The latter's body twitched, the mercury-like patterns on his body wildly distorted and flashed, countless bizarre patterns appeared and vanished, ultimately settling down to silence. Done. Fu Qian was satisfied with his achievement. The head that just fell was, of course, not his. Although his vitality was remarkably resilient, if he really were decapitated, he would die as expected. So, after confirming the effect of the decapitation law, he had an ingenious idea to retract his real head into his chest cavity, leaving only a decoy in its original place. As it turned out, the law was too rigid, unable to make such fine judgments. Feasts are just this handy. Thug digestion progress 3/3. At that moment, Fu Qian felt a surge of ocean-like, surging power emerging within him. Congratulations, you have perfectly digested the thug form. In the face of violence, there is neither destiny nor law. With each announcement, Fu Qian felt all parts of his body undergoing incredible enhancement, a raging power and killing intent infused in every cell, turning him into an embodiment of destruction. As his aura gradually stabilized, Fu Qian took a deep breath and confirmed his body had undergone a qualitative transformation. Not to mention anything else, just from the standpoint of life strength, he was at least 4th phase by now. This trip was not in vain. Mission completed, containment successful. At the same time, the long-missed prompt sounded in his ear. Chapter 76, Chapter 76, Chapter 75 Accident_1. Chapter 76, Chapter 75 Accident_1. Task complete. Fu Qian nodded in satisfaction and glanced back at Su Gao. This person was almost the only one in the room who dared to look up at him. When he had grabbed her arm just now, he could hardly feel a human body beneath the clothes. Realizing something, the corner of her mouth slightly curled up as she flashed an awkward smile at Fu Qian. Task accomplished, containment of number 2 to 103 successful. The scenery before his eyes dissolved swiftly, and Fu Qian found himself back in the warehouse, leisurely listening to the mission summary. Evaluation, blasphemer. The evil omen dissipated, the crisis obfuscated. Mysterious beings require the power of laws to manifest in the world, and those responding to the seeds of the law are the evil omen. As an incredible force, the law grows with the nourishment of sacrifices. Of course, even in its infancy, it still possesses the power of a high status, safeguarding its own path to growth. Unfortunately, when all these paths were cut off, the seeds of the law no longer had time to wait. Ultimately, it had no choice but to make a desperate move, depleting its form and deeply integrating with the evil omen. Yet, even so, it fell to the despicable deceit. Congratulations on turning the impossible into possible and rescuing an ancient town. Although your method of killing was excessively shocking, Su Gao, the executioner Yan, frightened everyone present and single-handedly wrote the accident report. You didn't draw much attention. Kills, none. Special kills, evil omen, mercury rule form. Rewards, SAN points plus 20, inspiration plus 5. Special kill reward, decree residue. Current SAN points, 60, current inspiration, 26. Play event recap. SAN points have finally recovered a bit. Decree residue, what is that? Fu Qian checked his gains from this trip, quickly turning to the rewards section. Decree residue, skill, fragments forged from the patterns of woven laws, containing the remnants of a special form of power. Once activated, it allows the glory of the laws to shine through you anew. Chaotic fragments, the power barely remains save for the visual effects. Laws. Seeing this, Fu Qian regained some spirit, naturally thinking of those flying heads everywhere. But the last sentence. Are you joking with me? Does it mean this skill only has visual effects now? Turn it on to appear impressive and cool. Fu Qian's brows furrowed as he tried to activate the skill. A barely perceptible golden pattern flashed away in an instant. Isn't this visual effect far too inferior compared to what Huang Yuanchang had on him? Although a glint of gold flashed just now, his was so bright it could nearly blind someone. Truly deserving of the name residue. Could it be that I struck too harshly in the end, pulverizing it too much? Indeed, having mercy makes sense. Oh well, if it's a useless skill, then so be it. Today's accomplishments are still quite good. Fu Qian has always been someone who takes things in stride. With residue in its own name, what more can one expect? Current authority has been promoted. After reviewing his rewards, Fu Qian was preparing to clock off and rest when an unfamiliar prompt appeared out of nowhere. Authority promoted. It must refer to the warehouse privileges. Is this a promotion and a raise? You can now access all synchronized items at any time. Could all the items that had been synchronized be the ones he had contained before? Fu Qian thought for a moment but didn't rush to remove his work badge. Instead, he continued along the shelves. He had already checked before, and each silver-white box on the shelves bore a number, the format of which was identical to those he had encountered during containment. However, these boxes were all tightly sealed and could not be opened. What was the number for Evil Omen Must Die Again? Recalling the content from before, Fu Qian quickly found the box numbered 2 to 103. Looking at the silver-white cube with not a single gap, Fu Qian thought for a moment and tried placing his hand on it. Without a sound, the cube's lid slowly opened to both sides, revealing its contents. Fu Qian saw the true face of Evil Omen Must Die for the first time. The box contained an irregular slab of stone resembling a meteorite, which looked like a miniature steel. The stone slab was covered in high-temperature melting traces, and its edges were overgrown with mysterious patterns like green moss. This is. Drawing closer, Fu Qian discovered that the slab was etched with dense text, some deep, some faint, most of it blurred, with only the bottom part remaining clear. Mystical hunter Fu Qian appeared in the restaurant, searching for traces of the evil omen. At the same time, the talisman that Ryu Xing had drawn on his wife Geng Yu's neck malfunctioned unexpectedly, a minor hidden flaw causing it to activate prematurely, resulting in Geng Yu's death before her lover arrived, attracting the attention of a passing night watchman. Even after witnessing the homicide right before his eyes, Fu Qian showed no hesitation and chose to leave the restaurant immediately. The night watchman arrived a moment too late to stop him. Hidden in the Huang family estate, Wang Yuanchang suddenly couldn't contain his urge to kill and decided to advance his plan. Wang Haosen and his young lover were sound asleep, completely unguarded against the intruder, Wang Yuanchang. Fu Qian headed straight for the Huang family estate, but he was a step too late and just missed Wang Yuanchang, who had left early. Given his mysterious origins, the Huang clan would not believe Fu Qian, and the residence of Huang Haosen was quite secluded, often taking the servants a long time to notice a bloodbath happening there. Fu Qian showed extreme hostility, bursting into the Huang family estate and heading straight for Huang Haosen's residence, where he found the bodies. Fortunately, the guards were very diligent and wasted no time in sounding the alarm. Fu Qian, who had just discovered the bodies, was surrounded by the Huang clan members, which inevitably delayed his pursuit. Unexpectedly, Fu Qian didn't attempt to explain and instead chose to transform into the likeness of Wang Yuanchang. Unfortunately, since he had only seen a photograph, his transformation wasn't perfect. Incredibly, the crude mask that Fu Qian casually put on his face had an unexpected effect. The Huang clan members never suspected the face underneath was fake, and to avoid the threat of the madman, they decided to withdraw all clan members back to the estate. Although unsure, Wang Leiji still chose to report Fu Qian as the evil omen to the night watchman, hoping to utilize their power to eliminate him. Executioner Yan Sugao happened to be operating nearby and received Huang's notification immediately. Fu Qian wasn't careful when fleeing and was quickly located by Sugao, who arrived just in time to witness Fu Qian committing murder. Unbelievably, Sugao showed an utterly nonsensical trust in Fu Qian and followed his orders exactly, significantly reducing Wang Yuanchang's freedom to move. Sensing danger, Wang Yuanchang abandoned his intention to go. Sensing danger, Wang Yuanchang abandoned his intention to go. Sensing danger, Wang Yuanchang went, and succeeded in killing Ryu Xing. Aside from the heavily guarded Huang family estate, all transcendents in Shiyuan City were gathered at the night watchman base. The sacrifice was not yet complete, and Huang Yuanchang, despite trying hard to endure, still couldn't control his urge to kill. Faced with a no-win situation, the seed of law inside Huang Yuanchang was forced to degrade into form. A series of fine and mysterious mercury-colored patterns. But that's okay, as long as enough transcendents are sacrificed, there is still hope for the law to be reforged. Huang Yuanchang received protection from the Mercury rule, and any being within a 5-meter radius of him would be decapitated. Incredibly, Fu Qian found a loophole in the law at an unimaginable speed. With the death of Huang Yuanchang, the law in his mind completely shattered and dissipated, losing the possibility of taking form. A series of chaotic golden patterns, with the stone below covered in cracks. The golden law, living beings may gaze upon, divine beings failed to condense. Chapter 77, Chapter 77, Chapter 76 Smile_1. Chapter 77, Chapter 76 Smile_1. There really is a catch. After reading through everything on the stone, Fuqian let out a long sigh of relief. Just as I thought, there was something very suspicious about Gengyu dying and coming back to life repeatedly. Indeed, there must be some secret entity behind it all, most likely the tree I saw. Many of the previous doubts now make complete sense. Now that I think about it, Gengyu's first death was meant to distract me and lead me to suspect Ryu Xing. The second time, even though I was already suspecting Huang Yuanchang, Gengyu acted against expectations by not dying, which successfully captured my attention, and I didn't immediately go after Huang Yuanchang, wasting time on Ryu Xing again. The third time, when I was certain that Huang Yuanchang was the evil omen, Gengyu died yet again. This time, the goal wasn't to confuse me but to attract the attention of Lu Jun and his companion. If I hesitated even for half a second, the night watchman would have trapped me in the restaurant, and there was a high chance I would conflict with the night watchman. And step by step thereafter, it was a deliberate scheme against me. That tree indeed holds quite a high tier, its understanding is akin to omniscience, thankfully not omnipotence, only capable of causing interference within a reasonable limit. Huang Yuanchang really was a puppet, with only a little knowledge at his disposal. This must be the true nature of a fated death. Huang Yuanchang's so-called ability to foresee death and avoid danger was in fact all arranged by this entity in the shadows. And its sole purpose was to let the seed of decree in Huang Yuanchang's mind take shape and become what's called the Golden Decree. Living beings may gaze directly upon divine beings. Judging from the content, the specific effect of this Golden Decree seems to be breaking a certain barrier, enabling people within a certain range to directly see the true form of that tree. This tree must have been attempting similar efforts, selecting suitable people to become the evil omen. Thinking back now, according to Ryu Xing's description, his dreams and the source of his abilities also seemed quite strange, which might also have something to do with this entity. It's just that Ryu Xing wasn't as compliant, not as active as Huang Yuanchang. Unfortunately for you, no matter how high your existence may be, the power of a task person added to infinite loading is beyond your imagination. Fuqian hummed, silently giving himself a 10-second round of applause in his heart. After feeling proud of himself, Fuqian put the items back, and the silvery white box quickly closed again. Today's task is complete, thank you for your effort. You may now leave the warehouse, see you tomorrow. Fuqian took off his work badge, and the scene in front of him shattered rapidly, bringing him back to his familiar home. Unexpectedly, I played a game against a divine level being today, making it quite a busy day of work. Of course, the rewards were plentiful. The perfect digestion of the thug propelled me officially into the fourth phase, putting me at the very top of the middle-tier transcendence. Fuqian was confident that even in a head-to-head confrontation with Li Weishuan, he would not be at a disadvantage. Even though the final reward might be a bit meager, it was of little consequence. He tried moving his legs a bit, feeling an unprecedented surge of explosive power coursing through him. Thinking it over, Fuqian decided not to rest and instead went straight out the door to flag down a car. There was something he needed to do. Here we are, 18 yuan. Several minutes later, the car stopped on a bustling street. It's been a while since I've been here. Getting off the car, Fuqian looked at the young men and women around him with a sense of nostalgia. This was a well-known street in Linqing, always bustling with activity because it is situated between several universities. However, being a local, Fuqian had only come here frequently during his college days and hardly visited at other times. Of course, Fuqian didn't come here to reminisce about his youth. Looking around, he quickly found a familiar sign and stepped inside. That's right, he came to eat. During his recent mission, the allure of delicious food had successfully whetted his appetite 3 times in a row. Especially the last 2 times, he had barely had the chance to take a bite, leaving him longing for more. River-looking Pavilion is the most famous restaurant on this street, known for its high-quality and expensive dishes, with the nickname Forget-Bed Pavilion. The reason for such a reputation is that it's said that anyone, male or female, who shares a picture of their meal here on social media, is likely to not return home that night. Of course, Fuqian never had such encounters. Being a person with a nasty personality and several years younger than his classmates, he hardly participated in most of the activities that college students enjoyed. Today was a weekday, and it was still early, so there weren't many diners in the restaurant. As soon as Fuqian walked in, a beautiful waitress greeted him. "Sir, how many in your party?" "2." Fuqian answered without any change in expression. He wasn't deliberately lying. On the way here, Fuqian had assessed his appetite and decided to eat a meal for 2. By saying this now, he could avoid extra explanations later. Guided by the waitress, Fuqian chose a seat by the window and looked at the scenery outside. Behind this street lay the Mi River, which cuts across Linkhang. It wasn't too big, but it was beautiful with its green trees and gentle waters. The service at this kind of restaurant is never quick, so Fuqian, without any hesitation, picked up a piece from the first dish that arrived and started eating. Starting to eat straight away. He stood up by a girl. Seeing Fuqian's actions, the waitress, who had been paying attention, couldn't help but be surprised. Although Fuqian was dressed casually, the university town was nearby, and it wasn't uncommon to see students skimping and saving to treat their girlfriends to a lavish meal here. The waitress had seen all sorts before. But for this customer, who ordered a meal for 2 and then started eating by himself, it was hard not to speculate. Fuqian, of course, could feel the waitress's peculiar gaze, but he didn't care at all. Fuqian's principle was simple: as long as no one disturbed him, imagination was a personal freedom. In the span of an hour, Fuqian, with a calm and efficient demeanor, rapidly polished off one dish after another. In the end, Fuqian pushed the plates away contentedly, stretched out in a long yawn, and signaled for the waitress to come over so he could pay the bill. "Hello." Noticing his gesture, the waitress walked over with a smile and stood in front of him. "How much is it?" Fuqian furrowed his brow. The waitress's smile was indeed sweet but somehow strangely off. "Hello." Upon hearing his question, the waitress moved a step closer, her smile becoming even purer and devoid of any impurities, yet she still didn't tell him the price. Something wasn't right. Fuqian furrowed his brows and quickly looked around. The next moment, he was shocked to find that everyone in the restaurant, whether they were waitstaff or guests, even the chefs in the transparent kitchen, were all looking at him, with exactly the same manner of smile on their faces. Pure and brilliant, like that of saints. Fuqian suddenly realized something and quickly checked the new skill he had acquired. Decree residue, had he forgotten to turn it off? Chapter 78, Chapter 78, Chapter 77 No need for money _1. Chapter 78, Chapter 77 No need for money _1. This really is an unexpected situation. Fuqian looked at the waitress in front of him. A standard oval face, pearly teeth, and a cute nose, her long hair was pinned up, and a silk scarf was tied around her slender and fair neck. Even in the red uniform, her curves were difficult to conceal, and her beauty was evident. But the eyes that were charming and lively just a moment ago were now blurred, as if intoxicated, as if in a daze. Was it caused by the decree residue skill? He had activated it earlier in the storage room, and because there was no effect, he truly forgot to turn it off manually. But to this extent, it's a bit exaggerated, a group stupidity aura. The waitress's state was even similar to those people staring directly at that tree. Feeling the gazes of smiling faces all over the room, it was honestly a bit creepy. Yet, when he was on the taxi coming here, the driver seemed to have no reaction. Time. Fuqian quickly thought of something. He had only been in the taxi for just over 10 minutes in total, and now he had been dining for more than an hour. It seems this thing needs enough time to be effective. Short-term contact won't have too much impact. What is your name? Fuqian stared at the waitress's face, changing the question. Pei Yanqing. The waitress responded subconsciously. Very good, Pei Yanqing, how much is my meal? Fuqian called her by her name, slowly asking again. How much? Pei Yanqing repeated monotonously, then mumbled to herself. You don't need to pay. Her consciousness had indeed been influenced. Not having to pay for the meal. Decree. Residue could be renamed to Dine and Aura. The indistinct golden pattern flashed across his body, and Fuqian decisively turned off the skill. He looked up again to observe the waitress's reaction. Unexpectedly, Pei Yanqing was momentarily stunned, and not only did she not come back to her senses, but her blurred eyes also appeared even more bewildered. After a few seconds of eye contact with Fu Qian, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Hello." Pei Yanqing stepped forward, almost pressing up against Fu Qian, her body trembling slightly, bending down as if she wanted to kiss the hand on Fu Qian's table. "Wait a minute." Fu Qian grabbed Pei Yanqing's arm, preventing her from getting closer, then looked around the room. Pei Yanqing's words and actions didn't seem to provoke any reaction. The other people in the restaurant still looked over with smiles on their faces. Thankfully, no one else came forward, and their expressions became somewhat restrained. The person furthest away was mechanically stuffing food into their mouth but couldn't seem to get it in. It seemed the other people weren't as heavily influenced. Distance indeed made a bigger impact. Pei Yanqing had been paying more attention to him just now, which could also be one of the reasons. Anyway, the biggest victim was her. "Hello." Naturally, Pei Yanqing couldn't resist Fu Qian's control, she couldn't move under his hold. But upon seeing Fu Qian holding her hand, her smile grew even brighter, becoming increasingly radiant, and despite it being in vain, she still struggled to lean forward. This couldn't continue. "Look here." Fu Qian patted Pei Yanqing, directing her gaze to his left hand. At the same time, the clear dream ring on his middle finger was activated. The galaxy turned, an invisible curtain expanded, enveloping the entire restaurant within it. Using it for the second time still felt very marvelous. Catching Pei Yanqing as she slid down, Fu Qian helped her sit down in a seat to the side. "Regardless, let's calm her down first." At this moment, everyone in the restaurant, just like her, was instantly drawn into a dream. As the initiator of the dream, Fu Qian found himself in a rather special state. His consciousness resided in the real world, but he could join the dream by simply inducing self-hypnosis. Leaning back in his seat, Fu Qian chose to self-hypnotize. In an instant, as if passing through a layer of water film, the restaurant bustled with activity once again. Pei Yanqing still stood by her seat, as if nothing had happened, while the others began to eat with sluggish movements. If not for the foreknowledge of being in a dream, it would be quite hard to distinguish the reality. "How much is it?" Fu Qian asked, looking at Pei Yanqing standing next to him. "Hello." Pei Yanqing's face was a picture of rapture. "It's on the house." This isn't good, she hasn't snapped out of it yet. Could it be that her sanity has already crumbled? Fu Qian strangely recalled the scene of everyone in Shiyuan City looking up at the sky. To his surprise, the ordeal was not yet over. Pei Yanqing, regaining her freedom, stretched out her arms the next moment, as if to embrace the sun, and uttered a heartfelt cry. "Hello. It's an honor." Her face wore a bewildered expression, and even her features became saintly and translucent. More astonishingly, her clothes began to gradually turn transparent. What is this even? He had not expected that strong emotions in a dream could trigger such a transformation. Watching her uniform rapidly become more suggestive, Fu Qian decisively struck Pei Yanqing's neck with a karate chop, causing her to collapse. This action was a bit dramatic, and once again attracted the attention of everyone in the restaurant. "She fainted from overwork," Fu Qian said nonchalantly. The crowd, with their vacant gazes, did not question this explanation and resumed their activities. Phew. After confirming once more that the influence on the remaining individuals was slowly fading, Fu Qian quickly exited the dream. Pei Yanqing lay on the table, unconscious, and without a word, Fu Qian picked her up, left the restaurant, and ended the dream the moment before stepping out. What to do now? He never expected that having a meal could lead to such an incident. Is staying at home the safer option? Fu Qian frowned as he looked at Pei Yanqing. Though it was unintended, the trouble had started because of him, and he couldn't simply abandon an innocent bystander. He hadn't anticipated the free meal halo to be so outlandish. Now it seemed that the description, "power so weak it's almost purely visual," was probably meant for transcendence. For the average person, it still came across as a bit overpowering. Considering the fragile constitution of ordinary people, and with no better solution at hand, the only option was to see if some rest would lead to improvement. If she was to rest, odds were this girl was still a student, taken to a hotel by a strange man might not reflect well on her. Fu Qian hailed a taxi and decided to take her home directly. Luckily, it was midday, when most of the community's elderly had gone back for lunch, so it didn't cause a sensation. Even so, when Fu Qian supported her out of the car, they still attracted quite a few wary glances. Especially considering Pei Yanqing's privacy, Fu Qian had taken off his jacket to cover her face. Fu Qian. Finally, an elderly woman from the crowd of onlookers couldn't resist interjecting. Who is this young lady? Is she not feeling well? She's my fan. Fu Qian blinked. She fainted from excitement at seeing me. Chapter 79, Chapter 79, Chapter 78 Pei Yanqing _1. Chapter 79, Chapter 78 Pei Yanqing _1. In the increasingly peculiar gaze of the old lady, Fu Qian carried the person all the way home and carefully laid them on the sofa. What to do now? Looking at the unconscious Pei Yanqing on the sofa, Fu Qian fell into deep thought. If her mind had indeed been wiped clean, wouldn't that be akin to spiritual murder on my part? But how to save her? At the moment, my means for addressing this are really quite limited. Use the tyrant's fist to whip her a few times in a fight poison with poison strategy. The high likelihood of making things worse aside, her delicate body certainly wouldn't withstand it. To persist with the mistake and shine the idiot's halo on her for a few hours, making her into a complete fangirl, then commanding her to live like a normal person. Such matryoshka doll-like behavior, which exists only in theory, is even less acceptable. Besides, it is essentially like an ostrich burying its head in the sand, not my style at all. Fu Qian always considered himself a reasonable person. As he'd describe it himself, we're all trying to get by in this world, and everyone has to take responsibility for their actions. If I've truly ruined this girl because of my own mistake, no matter how hard it is, I definitely have to figure out a way to make it right. After sleeping soundly for 2 hours, Pei Yanqing's body twitched, and she drew in a deep breath. She's waking up. Fu Qian remained silent, quietly observing her reaction. Pei Yanqing's eyelashes quivered, first opening her eyes in a daze, then subconsciously looking around, and furrowing her brows upon finding herself in a strange environment. There's a change. Seeing that flicker of awareness in her eyes, Fu Qian breathed a sigh of relief. As long as there's hope, that's fine. The next moment, he moved the ring on his hand. The clear dream ring activated once again, enveloping them both. Name: Pei Yanqing. Age: 21 years old. Where do you live? Linkheng University Student Apartments, number 9, room 207. Wait a second, who are you? Indeed a student. Fu Qian looked at the questioning Pei Yanqing with a contented face. This child seems to have been saved. You can call me Mr. No Money Needed. Recalling her earlier words, Fu Qian blurted out a casual remark. No money needed. Pei Yanqing stared blankly at Fu Qian for a few seconds, then her gaze began to scatter once again. She's still not fully recovered. Fu Qian got a scare, having not expected a jest to nearly drag her back in. Apparently, some mental imprints still haven't been completely erased. This needed to be left to time. Fu Qian snapped his fingers to attract Pei Yanqing's attention, preventing her from getting confused again. Where is this, and why am I here? As Pei Yanqing slowly came to her senses, she once again raised the question that had come to her earlier. Well asked. The events of these past few hours were indeed difficult to explain. Fortunately, I had already decided to attribute everything to a dream. Why is there a UFO in the sky? Fu Qian suddenly exclaimed, pointing out the window. A UFO. Pei Yanqing instinctively turned her head to look. Fu Qian carefully controlled his strength and delivered another chop to the back of her neck. Not yet fully awake, Pei Yanqing once again fainted promptly and neatly. This time, Fu Qian learned his lesson and directly hailed a car, letting it come to the building's entrance, and supported her into it. Brother, your girlfriend's not feeling well. The driver glanced at the senseless Pei Yanqing, unable to resist asking. She's just a fan. Fu Qian said indifferently. Fans. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, the taxi driver revealed an even more profound smile. Understood, understood. Your fan isn't feeling well, so you're helping with the treatment, right? Moral standards are declining, and people's hearts are no longer like the old days. Looking at the driver whose imagination was too wild, Fu Qian huffed, and the legendary aura of chill instantly filled the entire car. The driver shivered and inexplicably felt short of breath and shaky in his limbs. He no longer dared to joke and concentrated on driving straight to the destination. Speaking of which, Pei Yanqing's current appearance indeed wasn't suitable to be seen by others. After giving the driver a little fright, Fuqian also realized this was a problem. It wasn't a big deal outside, but once at the university, arriving at the school in a work uniform brought by a stranger, even if explained as passing out during work, it would still be hard to avoid remarks. Seeing the task through to the end, the destination was quickly reached. Supporting Pei Yanqing as they got out of the car, Fuqian took out his phone and made a call to young Master Qin. "What do you need from me?" On the other end, young Master Qin's voice still sounded unnatural, indicating that the previous black dress incident had left him with quite a shadow. Add to that the current situation, how had he, a fine young man, inexplicably become a source of trouble? Fuqian couldn't help but shake his head. "Give me Tan Ying's number." "Tan Ying." Qin Mingze paused before responding, his voice stumbling. "That girl might have some complaints about you recently, are you sure you want to contact her?" "Aha, need her help with something." That's right, after thinking it over, Fuqian realized he actually had no one else to ask for this kind of help. If he wasn't mistaken, Linkheng University College of Fine Arts was also in this campus, and Tan Ying, whom he had only met once, turned out to be the most suitable person. All right. Qin Mingze was clearly busy and sent over Tan Ying's contact information without further conversation. Fuqian dialed the number listed and it rang 4 times before someone picked up, with Tan Ying's voice, full of confusion, coming through. "Who is this?" "Fuqian. We just had an in-depth discussion about art not long ago. There's a girl from your school who fainted, can you help bring her back to the dorm?" Fainted, a girl. Finally, Tenning responded with a hint of panic in her voice. "Did you cause her to faint?" "It was indeed me who caused it, though not in the way you're thinking." Fuqian thought to himself. But of course, he couldn't say that. It didn't matter if he himself had no principles, but the victim did. "What do you take me for?" "She fainted from exhaustion during part-time work. I just happened to come across her." "All right, wait there." Not long after hanging up, Fuqian saw Tan Ying's car pass through the school gate and come towards him, eventually stopping abruptly in front of him. And when Tan Ying saw Pei Yanqing next to Fuqian, her eyes widened. "Do you know who she is?" "Supposedly named Pei Yanqing." "Why, is she famous?" "There aren't many at Linkheng University who don't know her." Tenning snorted and scrutinized Pei Yanqing back and forth a few times, clearly not quite understanding the situation before her. "You didn't do anything to her, did you?" "Would I do something to a girl and bring her to find you?" Fuqian asked while rubbing his head. Tenning thought about it and realized the logic was indeed absurd, so she didn't dwell on it any further and immediately helped to escort the person onto her vehicle. As Tan Ying's car drove away, this trouble was finally settled. When Pei Yanqing woke up in the dorm, the plot in her mind would basically consist of her fainting at work, being helped back by kind-hearted people and classmates, with some hazy dreams mixed in between. Finally sorted out, staying at home really is simpler. Fuqian felt this deeply once again. Chapter 80, Chapter 79 King of the White Tower _1. Chapter 80, Chapter 79 King of the White Tower _1. Identity verification completed, work for the day beginning. Until the next day when he entered the warehouse, Fuqian still couldn't help but feel a bit astonished. Who would have thought that a skill with a name as straightforward as Decree Residue could brainwash someone to such an extent? Ordinary people now seemed far too vulnerable in front of him. He would have to be careful when dealing with young Master Qin and his ilk in the future. In comparison, the worlds within the task seemed to allow for more freedom of action. Could it be that from now on, he would only be able to travel there? Warning, leak accident. Name, Scepter, Code, 2-088. Today's work content has been updated. Enter the containment scene of 2-088, complete the recontainment. Another level 2. The leak warning was not surprising, but the number made Fuqian immediately think of his previous experiences. A level 2 incident usually wasn't easy to handle. Couldn't they give me a level 3 for once, so I could relax and take a break? Amidst his musings, the scene in front of him rapidly blurred. Entering 2-088 containment scene. 2%, 4%, 10%, 28%, 82%, 100%, loading complete. This is a place many yearn for, a whirl of riches and indulgence, a haven of unrestrained revelry. In a world of unfettered freedom, returning to one's animal instincts coexists with an audience before the divine, yet the corners outside the rules often rely on even stricter regulations to exist. Skills: air bullet, visceral critical strike, cat school, feast, locked, decree residue. Weapon: tyrant's fist. Condition for containment achievement: eliminate the king of the White Tower. Current SAN points: 59, current inspiration: 26. As the string of explanatory text ended, Fu Qian regained his senses, and then there was a burst of light before his eyes. Sunshine, sandy beaches, crystalline blue waters, and the gentle warmth of a soothing breeze. It looked like an island. Did they hear my wishes? Did I really get a leisurely side quest? Fu Qian looked down at himself, noting the shorts and beach shoes, with sunglasses hanging off the collar, a perfect vacation look for the seaside. "Sir, your drink is here." A soft, enticing voice sounded, and Fu Qian turned around to find a beautiful waitress dressed as a succubus, holding out a tray to him. Blue-violet hair, delicately matching eyeshadow, and a dress so chic it exaggerated the even more exaggerated curves, with two small horns curving from her head. Professional. Fu Qian praised, taking the glass from the succubus waitress. It contained a blood-red liquid. At that moment, a shadow passed over him, and Fu Qian looked up to see an airship slowly drifting overhead. "Welcome to the Ring Islands." A line of fiery red letters was painted on the bulging hull. Behind that line was a three-tiered tower emblem. "Is this place called the Ring Islands? That emblem looks kinda familiar." Fu Qian remembered something and looked back toward the sea. Sure enough, within the blue waters and sky, not even a nautical mile away from here, there stood a white tower reaching into the clouds, its shape somewhat similar to the emblem. If he wasn't mistaken, his task was to eliminate the king of the White Tower. If nothing unexpected happened, his target should be there, right? That's way easier than last time when he had to find Evil Omen. Is it really a leisurely side quest? But he needed to confirm that. "Hey, gorgeous." Fu Qian waved at the succubus waitress. "Do you know who the king of the White Tower is?" Hearing Fu Qian's summon, the succubus sashayed over, then covered her mouth and giggled upon hearing his words. "King of the White Tower, isn't that you, sir?" Now it was Fu Qian's turn to be shocked. Was the task simpler than he had thought? Just sunbathe for a while, then sever his own meridians, and that's it, task complete. Although there are so many people on the beach today, they're all here for tonight's competition. But let me tell you a secret. The succubus girl leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Out of all these people, I fancy your chances the most because..." She licked her lips. "You look the most delicious. Do your best tonight. You're sure to become the king of the White Tower." Seeing Fu Qian's somewhat astonished expression, the succubus girl seemed to realize something and paused before pointing out to the sea. "You wouldn't be asking about the owner of that tower, would you?" By Jinting, the CEO of White Tower Company, it's rare not to know that name. Although he usually keeps a low profile and seldom shows his face, you'll definitely see him tonight. After saying this, the succubus girl's gaze lingered on Fu Qian for a long time, giving him a flirtatious wink before leaving. Not only that, but she also deliberately turned around next to him, allowing Fu Qian to fully appreciate her exaggerated curves. As well as the strikingly small, dark red wings located on her shoulder blades at the back. Those things don't seem to be just for show. Fu Qian took a deep breath. The roots of those two wings dug deep into the skin, and upon closer inspection, there were even faint scars on her back. If this was cosplay, then it had to be said, it was extremely committed. As he thought about it, the succubus girl took a light leap forward, her petite wings instantly stretched out to about a meter wide bat wings, gliding smoothly for over 10 meters with a few flaps. They were indeed real. This must have been done through surgery, the origins unknown, but certainly not human. A bit crazy. Truly a place of uninhibited indulgence. Fu Qian gained a deeper understanding of the introduction just given. After reflecting, Fu Qian remembered what the succubus girl mentioned earlier. According to her, he had signed up for a competition happening tonight. and the winner would be crowned king of the White Tower. And these people on the beach were all the competitors tonight. Fu Qian looked around, and indeed, there was no shortage of people. Men and women, old and young, with the common feature being signs of physical training on their bodies, they seemed quite capable, relative to the average person, that is. After all, some of them didn't seem like transcendents at all, but more like ordinary people who happened to be strong. If the competition wasn't split into different levels, then it was definitely going to be a real free-for-all. The people around all seemed quite normal, none of them bore the surgical marks like the succubus girl. What are you looking at? As he pondered, Fu Qian's scrutiny quickly provoked a reaction. A hulking brute standing over 2 meters tall got up, glaring over this way with a fierce and ferocious expression. A body of bulging muscles that exuded an oppressive presence, emitting a paramecium level of terrifying aura. Fu Qian didn't even bother with him, fumbling in the only pocket on his body and unsurprisingly pulled out a room card. He checked it against the picture, confirming he was staying in the hotel behind the beach. I'm talking to you, pretty boy. Fu Qian's attitude, as if dealing with thin air, clearly infuriated the angry giant even more. After a resolute affirmation of Fu Qian's good looks, the brute embraced the principle of action over words and decisively made a move. A shadow crossed the 10-odd meters between them like a javelin and flew over. Chapter 81, Chapter 81, Chapter 80, King of the White Tower, Part 2_1. Chapter 81, Chapter 80, King of the White Tower, Part 2_1. Is everyone so hot-tempered these days? Fu Qian easily dodged the attack and looked down to see what it was. The object thrown by the burly men had buried itself deep in the sand, leaving only the tail sticking out. Quite a bit of strength, indeed. With such force, even hitting a low-tier transcendent in a vital spot could be lethal. Very well, then I need not be courteous anymore. Fu Qian stepped back using instant step, crossing a distance of over 10 meters in the blink of an eye. Before Angry Man Brother could even make a frightened face, Fu Qian had reached out and grabbed him by the throat. The fear of death instantly gripped his heart. Stop. At that moment, someone shouted to halt the fight, and 2 individuals in special uniforms hurried over. Isn't fighting allowed? Fu Qian didn't loosen his grip, but blinked in question. Fighting is allowed, even murder is permissible. The 2 uniformed men explained sternly. But dirtying the beach is strictly forbidden, offenders will be fined. Huh. Fu Qian looked down to see. A warm liquid was running down the legs of burly Man Brother, swiftly absorbed by the fine white sand beneath their feet. No wonder he had heard sounds earlier. Killing this guy would be easy, just a light squeeze would do. But since the human body is 70% water, keeping it entirely clean would be quite difficult, and if he died, the mess on the ground would be left unaccounted for and Fu Qian might have to pay for it himself. Thinking this, he tossed burly Man Brother into the arms of the 2 men. You pollute, you clean it up. The 2 security officers reacted swiftly, both catching the men in their arms, one on each side. Burly Man Brother's face was now ashen. A hefty fine seemed to await him. Following the information on his room card, Fu Qian quickly found his accommodation. The room was luxurious, equipped with all sorts of facilities, and Fu Qian quickly connected to the network to look up information about the Ring Islands. This place truly was lawless. The Ring Islands were famous, a simple search yielded various introductions and analyses. And indeed, according to the data, this was a special place. The Ring Islands consisted of 7 islands arranged in a spiral, forming the shape of a ring, with the island containing the White Tower at the very center. It was said that originally, there were only a few rocks protruding above the sea here. One day, a wealthy consortium with money to burn took an interest in the area and spent a fortune on land reclamation, creating this place out of thin air. Because it was located in a no-man's land and nearly immune to the legal restrictions of any country, all sorts of traditional industries thrived on the islands. In less than 5 years, the Ring Islands had become infamous worldwide, a byword for luxury, to the point where the consortium even renamed itself the White Tower Company. Of course, there were other places in the world outside the reach of the law, but what made the Ring Islands special was that after the White Tower Company conjured up this island from nothing, they somehow managed to sign a special agreement with the Night Watchman. Through this agreement, they obtained a considerable degree of exemption in the supernatural realm, which was the true foundation of their prosperity. According to the information obtained so far, the night watchman had a very low tolerance for certain sensitive activities involving transcendent powers. No matter what kind of consortium or family, crossing a red line was futile. Messy research institutions were smashed as soon as they were found. Thus, the Ring Islands rapidly became a haven for eccentrics. All sorts of talents who couldn't find a place or fit in elsewhere gathered here, creating a dazzling spectacle. Though, to avoid becoming a safe haven for transcendent criminals, they still complied with the agreement to extradite wanted individuals to the Night Watchman. Besides that, various activities banned elsewhere, such as body modification and taboo research, could all be found here. Among the most famous is the renowned limb attachment. As the name suggests, it involves using a special technique to attach the limbs of transcendent beings to human bodies, indirectly granting some of their original abilities. It sounds somewhat perverse, but there are still those who flock to it, especially those who originally had no chance of possessing transcendent powers. Of course, the effects are definitely discounted. As for those like the succubus girl who go crazy with their cosplay, purely in pursuit of visual effects, one can find quite a few of them here. It's for this reason the Ring Islands are also known as the Limb Attachment Islands. It's downright twisted. Fuqian silently contemplated this and continued reading. There are generally two ways to enter the Ring Islands: spend money or receive an invitation. It goes without saying that spending money is incredibly expensive. Just counting the zeros on the price can take a long time. As for the invitations, one way to get them is to sign up for the legendary King of the White Tower contest. Anyone who registers not only gets a chance to enter for free, but as long as they don't surrender and leave the match, they can obtain a permanent pass whether they win or lose. Those old guys on the beach must have all come this way. If one wins the competition, the rewards are even more extravagant. It's said that those ranking high are awarded a free limb attachment opportunity. Very generous, but there's a catch. If you can't surrender and leave, it means you fight to the death. Considering the mixed bag of participants and the varying strength levels, a considerable number of people are likely to die in the arena. Indeed, free things are often the most expensive. Of course, some people might come here to indulge themselves and take a chance before they die. From the materials, it seems that the White Tower Company has spent no small amount of money creating such a marvel at sea. But it's also the existence of limb attachment technology that has allowed it to grow into a powerful conglomerate with significant influence in just a few decades. Its founder, Bai Jinting, is likely the target of my trip. According to the information, he's over 70 years old and now rarely leaves the islands, spending most of his time in his White Tower base. This is good news for me. There appears to be no time limit for this mission, so there's no need to rush. I can plan carefully. This place is full of remarkable people and beautiful scenery. Might as well treat it like a vacation. Of course, there's no reason to rush because, according to the official information, this place not only attracts fourth-phase transcendents looking to retire but even has a demigod presiding over it. A high-tier transcendent is a demigod, meaning at least third phase or higher. Having just upgraded, it's best for me to remain humble. In addition, at the bottom of many documents, there's a file named the White Tower Codex. It meticulously lists a wide variety of prohibited activities, nearly 1,000 of them. With nothing better to do, Fuqian, as an avid reader, actually read through each one without missing a word. And indeed, he found a regulation that prohibited dirtying the beach. If anyone thinks that nearly 1,000 rules is too restricting, they're thinking too much. After reading through them, Fuqian concluded that most of these regulations, if you meet the scumbag criteria and are strong enough, are not much of a problem. And most importantly, after reviewing from beginning to end, Fuqian confirmed there was no rule against killing by Jinting. After reviewing these regulations and roughly formulating an execution strategy, the sky had gradually darkened. Someone came to knock on the door, reminding that the competition was about to start. Bring your number plate and follow us. Following the crowd, the towering White Tower was quickly in sight. As the gates slowly opened, a tidal wave of cheering burst forth. Chapter 82, Chapter 82, Chapter 81, King of the White Tower, Part 3_1. Chapter 82, Chapter 81, King of the White Tower, Part 3_1. Have these people eaten mouse bait or something? Looking at the scene inside the White Tower, Fuqian was struck by a bout of reflection. In a suddenly expansive space, waves of noise rolled over one another. There were men and women, old and young, their cheers and screams intermingling. Some were simply meaningless howls, sounding like demonic donkeys. All of this echoing together oddly reminded one of a tune called Dance of the Swarming Bees, making it hard to keep from scratching one's ears. From the inside, the building looked even more magnificent than from the outside, though the architectural style left something to be desired. The vast space and spiraling white columns put one in mind of an unbelievably grand cathedral. However, at the base of the space was an area akin to the Roman Colosseum, surrounded by densely packed honeycomb-like stands. At the same time, the variety of bizarre screens above the platform and the chaotic light strips further up clearly declared that one was in the information age. Is this the legendary, invincible Ivory Tower Arena? One must say it fully reflected the builder's deep pockets and appalling taste. The intense discord, if one had to describe it, was like a statue of the King of Hell, wearing a Bluetooth headset, fondly twirling a boomerang in its hand. "Hello, please come this way." A young woman with auburn hair and robed like an ancient Greek female priestess, approached, timely interrupting Fu Qian's reflections with an impeccable smile and urging him to enter through a side passage. Fu Qian looked around and indeed, every competing gladiator was accompanied by such a person. Considering the number of participants in past years, it was impressive they managed to find so many psychopomps. One could imagine that a good number of these female priestesses would soon be out of a job. Passing through a long corridor, the two rapidly arrived in a room resembling a preparation area. "You can choose any weapon that suits you." The female priestess led Fu Qian to a weapons rack near the wall, pointing to it as she spoke. "Can I use anything?" Fu Qian scrutinized the rack. The variety of weapons was quite rich, ranging from the most common swords, knives, and spears to all kinds of unimaginable shapes. The most important aspect was the quality craftsmanship. They all seemed quite exceptional. Of course, they all shared one common feature: he didn't know how to use any of them. That's right, ever since becoming a thug, he hadn't had time to learn to use any type of weapon, always adhering to the principle of the best technique is no technique, and swinging his fists recklessly. The key thing was that so far this seemed to work quite well, so Fu Qian wasn't planning to change his approach for the time being. "Anything that is up there is fine," the female priestess replied. "Also, any personal equipment is allowed as long as it passes the inspection." "Understood." Quite accommodating indeed. Fu Qian looked around. Given the large number of participants, it was impossible for the preparation room to be a luxury of one room per person. Besides himself, there were 3 others in the room. A young man who seemed quite nervous, a blonde young woman, and a pitch-black tin can. Fu Qian observed the last contestant, fully decked out in extravagant black plate armor with intricate etched patterns. With sharp horns on the helmet, one might indeed mistake him for the Black Knight. "This is allowed?" Fu Qian pointed out. "Yes." The female priestess nobly and coolly nodded, while also gesturing towards another set of racks on the opposite side of the room. "In fact, there are some pieces of armor here as well, which you may choose at your discretion." Fu Qian looked around, and various forms of protective gear and shields were lined up all the way to the end. He was still being modest, though. While not as ostentatious as the Black Knight, he basically had all kinds of standard equipment. Unfortunately, it was still of no use to me. An attack that could harm myself could not simply be negated by a few pieces of iron. Fu Qian looked around and eventually chose to wear a white mask on his face. All set. The mask was very light, not even made of metal, so light that its weight was almost unnoticeable. Last time at the Huang family's mid-levels manor, I wore just such a mask. When the other items seemed useless, it made more sense to use this to maintain a sense of mystery befitting a master. Fu Qian's choice obviously took the female priestess by surprise, and she paused for a moment before she could muster a smile fitting of a goddess and started to introduce the current situation with warmth. "Due to the large number of participants, there will be 3 arenas operating simultaneously, so all you need to do is wait here." Fu Qian nodded, listening to the sounds of the crowd outside, curious how the King of the White Tower would make his appearance, when suddenly the shouting outside stopped. The next moment, various lights instantly focused on one spot, and an open elevator descended slowly from the sky. Ah! Fu Qian's vision, much improved from before, immediately confirmed that the man in the elevator was his target for this trip, by Jinting, the King of the White Tower. Compared to the demons and monsters in the stands, this man looked quite normal, not having multiple heads at least. The problem is, old men, aren't you over 70 by now? Putting aside any safety concerns, are you serious about this iron cage-designed elevator? Under the pursuit of the spotlights, Bai Jinting's elevator came to a slow stop, finally resting at a position separate from the other stands. Welcome to the Ring Islands. Bai Jinting, already in his 70s, looked much younger than his actual age and began his speech with a strong and clear voice. Wow! The cheers instantly doubled in volume. Welcome to the Ivory Tower Arena. Fu Qian squinted, observing his surroundings. This bizarrely shaped behemoth was equipped with extremely strict security measures that could drive one crazy. Beyond the various defensive methods, the biggest cornerstone here was the legendary demigod, known as the Spirit of the Storm, Ibu. It was said that 5 years ago at the age of 68, he was honored with reaching the third phase, and later, due to his fondness for the sea climate, he accepted the invitation of the White Tower Group to become a special advisor, since then rarely leaving the place. According to the information, Bai Jinting seldom showed himself, always hidden under such tight security. Only during the annual King of the White Tower tournament did he participate throughout the event and personally award the ultimate winner in the end. Theoretically, this presented a rather good opportunity. The information clearly stated that he was not a transcendent, and the plan to potentially kill the champion with one swift move during the award ceremony was a very reasonable approach to complete the mission. Even if the demigod intervened, it would be too late by then. Moreover, this mission had no time limit, so it was indeed possible to spend some time to finish this tournament first. And in the process, to get to know this target of mine a little better. Even as a heartless mission doer, I have principles. Gather some charges, so when it comes to execution, it will be entirely justified. In the end, Fu Qian inexplicably felt that this man in front of him might not be so easy to kill. Bai Jinting's speech could be described as lengthy, and he even took over the host's job, slowly reading through the competition rules himself. This shameless waste of time successfully added a bit more intent to kill in Fu Qian. Finally, with Bai Jinting contentedly seated, the host grabbed back the microphone and announced the start of the competition. Chapter 83, Chapter 83, Chapter 82, King of the White Tower, Part 4_1. Chapter 83, Chapter 82, King of the White Tower, Part 4_1. When Fu Qian saw his first opponent, he momentarily thought the Black Knight had just changed his paint job. It was yet another fellow clad in full armor. Even though he didn't look as ostentatious as the Black Knight did, he was still armed to the teeth. Fu Qian paid no attention to the referee's drivel, instead looking up with interest at the stands. Above him, the stands were now a showcase of the Ring Island's craftsmanship, filled with a variety of forms. 3 hands, 4 feet, scaly skins, long tails, constructions that challenged the imagination left spectators in awe. Accompanied by the occasional howls, it almost felt like stepping into a coliseum. The only difference was that the beasts had moved to the stands. Fu Qian wasn't an intolerant person, in fact, he was quite supportive of all kinds of body modifications. In his words, he respected an individual's freedom to perfect their body as they saw fit. The problem was, the aesthetics of these limb attachment masses in the stands really lacked any sense of beauty. Clay figures kneaded by kindergartners with closed eyes would look more pleasing. An old saying goes, looks are combat power, and what's not good-looking can't be strong. No matter the technology of the White Tower Company, their taste was seriously bad. In contrast, that succubus girl on the beach was considered quite decent. 3, 2, 1, the match begins. It was at this moment the referee finally announced the start of the match, and almost immediately, the opponent quickly stepped forward. A howling gust of wind accompanied a gleaming broadsword that came slashing over. Protected by armor and foregoing defense, wielding a large sword to kill the opponent in a second, even if there was a counterattack, it would at most result in a mutual wound. It has to be said, this is a pretty reasonable tactic, provided that both sides can be considered worthy opponents. As the cold gleam of the slash approached, Fu Qian stood his ground without dodging, planting his foot firmly. In the explosion-like sound, dust billowed, and bricks and stones flew. The arena, which seemed incredibly solid, was directly dented with a deep pit by this stomp. Under the ferocious impact, the opponent was sent flying, flattening to the ground with the sword, unable to get up. The whole process took less than 5 seconds. With 2 tentacles each ending in an eye extending from his arm, the referee's 4 eyes stared at the deep pit on the ground for a long time before coming back to his senses. Seeing that Fu Qian had no interest in delivering a finishing blow, the referee reluctantly declared the end of the round. When Fu Qian returned to the rest area, the other 3 were absent, and the 4 female priestesses looked his way almost in unison, their expressions somewhat complex. After searching around outside, Fu Qian soon found that spirited young man. He was currently standing in one of the arenas, facing an opponent, a woman who believed that the less she wore, the higher her defense, and as she moved, flesh was fleetingly exposed. Since her skills mainly focused on close-quarters submission techniques, the whole scene was hardly fit for the eyes. However, the audience in the stands seemed to enjoy this spectacle, wailing and howling as they threw all sorts of messy things in the direction of the arena. The young man was clearly not a transcendent, but it was evident that he'd undergone thorough training. Agile and dodging, he managed to maintain a clear mind amid his opponent's bodily onslaught and ultimately won the round, though not without difficulty. After the opponent collapsed from exhaustion, he too graciously refrained from delivering a final strike, which drew boos from the stands. Upon returning to the rest room, the young man could hardly contain his excitement. Facing the gaze of the female priestesses that welcomed back a hero, he somewhat awkwardly accepted a towel, not forgetting to cast a wary glance at Fu Qian. There was no need. Fu Qian shook his head internally. Though he didn't know what had bamboozled the men into coming here, he really didn't have to consider him a potential rival. Soon, the other 2 also returned in succession, with all 4 managing to make it to the next round. There was no interval between the 2 rounds, and the spirited young man was quickly called out again. Unfortunately, his luck wasn't as good this time. His opponent was a bald muscleman with muscles bulging like cheong knots, his face covered with crisscrossed scars, looking extremely fierce. Of course, these were not the main points. It was obvious that the man was a transcendent. Almost the instant he stepped onto the stage, his fists burst forth with a flame-like heat. In such a situation, the spirited young man knew he was not a match, but clearly, he didn't want to give up without a fight. So he braced himself with utmost attention, closely watching his opponent's every move in an attempt to hold out a while longer. However, his opponent did not give him the chance to do so. Accompanied by a streak of fire, the young man was blasted away, rolling to the edge of the ring before finally coming to a stop. By this point, his entire upper arm was completely deformed and charred, and he had promptly passed out. This was the result of his quick reaction, raising his arm in front of his body at the first sign of attack. According to the rules, losing consciousness like this didn't count as a surrender or defeat, and he could still enjoy the promised conditions, namely getting a permanent pass. Perhaps that was what he was thinking. Luckily for him, his opponent was equally disdainful of delivering a coup de grace. After just 1 punch he stood in place, his gaze fixed on the referee, waiting for the announcement of the result. But the referee hesitated to act and instead stared at the fallen spirited young man. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 seconds later, a jolt ran through the young man's body, and a yellow-white flame burst forth from his arm, swiftly engulfing his entire body, reducing him to a charred husk. Only then did the referee nonchalantly declare the bald man victorious amidst a more fervent cheer from the stands, utterly satisfied. As expected. Fu Qian shook his head. What cannot be attained by force cannot be attained by reason either. Some loopholes exist precisely for you to exploit. This one was still naive. Fu Qian glanced to the side, where the spirited young man's female priestess expressionlessly gathered their belongings, preparing to send them back along with his ashes. At this moment, Fu Qian heard someone calling his name. His second match was about to begin. As expected, once on the stage, Fu Qian saw the charred marks of the spirited young man in the corner. It was clear that the cleaners had been very diligent, but they still couldn't scrape it all away. By now, his second opponent had already taken the stage early, looking provocatively this way. 3, 2. Before the referee had finished counting down, a black shadow, carrying a cold gleam, had already charged forth, moving as unpredictably as a ghost. Fu Qian looked up at the referee, who was completely indifferent to the proceedings. I see, Fu Qian suddenly recalled the rules of the Ring Islands. The absence of prohibitions permits all actions. The referee indeed was counting down, but the rules announced earlier did not mandate that the round could only begin after the countdown ended. As his ferocious opponent charged at him, Fu Qian twisted his body, raised his foot, and charged his strength. Boom! In a deafening roar that shook the heavens and the earth, half of the ring collapsed, a pit nearly 10 times larger than before appearing before everyone's eyes. Within the pit lay 2 mangled corpses. If I remember correctly, the rules also did not state that one could not kill the referee. After a 2-second silence, the stands erupted with a climax-like cheer. Chapter 84, Chapter 84, Chapter 83, King of the White Tower, Part 5_1. Chapter 84, Chapter 83, King of the White Tower, Part 5_1. Fu Qian's violent demolition behavior successfully stirred up a strong reaction. Amidst the hysterical cheers and screams, as a person with great empathetic capability, Fu Qian seemed to have felt the joy of the crowd and waved to the stands with flair. Another burst of adrenaline-pumping roars followed, and the rain of gifts nearly filled in the large pit on the arena. It has to be said, the security of White Tower is rather good, and quickly a team arrived at the arena, their faces almost dripping with sweat as they stared at the big pit. If the first round's arena could be patched up and used, this one would basically need to be demolished and rebuilt. But true to the nature of a place of unrestrained indulgence, after the team fished 2 bodies out of the pit, they simply said nothing and withdrew. This scene increased Fu Qian's interest in this place by a notch. From a certain perspective, this fallen place even adheres to rules more than the outside world does. At this moment, a trembling referee took to the stage, announcing the winner from a distance of 8 paces. When Fu Qian left the field, he was treated like a hero, with lights following him all the way to the preparation room, clearly having become a star of the arena. Welcome back. The female priestess holding towels and other items stared dumbfounded at Fu Qian's leg, barely daring to approach. In fact, not just her, but also the blonde female contestant beside her was staring at him with a grave expression. It has to be said that her strength is indeed not bad. Looking at the blonde woman staring at him, Fu Qian gave a positive appraisal. This young woman, dressed in a sharp combat suit, blonde hair, blue eyes, delicate features, her snow-white skin nearly blending indiscernibly with her similarly colored outfit. Though she appears fragile, she is far from the level of an ordinary spirited young man. Judging by her aura, she's clearly a transcendent, possibly even of the 7th phase. Veil. Unexpectedly, responding to Fu Qian's gaze, the blonde woman took the initiative to step forward and introduce herself. Fu Qian. Fu Qian nodded. Mr. Fu, I must say, your strength is so overwhelming that it brings people to despair. Veil's smile carried a hint of helplessness. You flatter me. Fu Qian looked at her. So young and already a 7th phase, it's hard to imagine what drove her to participate in this. Limb attachment's rewards may be irresistible, particularly for ordinary people, but real transcendents, unless they hit a bottleneck with no hope of promotion, are rarely willing to do such things. Let alone such a promising character. White Tower Company might be able to offer something to entice her, but if the rewards were too good and there were too many transcendents, why would ordinary people like that spirited young man even sign up? After all, spectacles are comprised of many elements, bullying the weak is also one. As it turned out, Fu Qian's judgment was quite accurate. In the second round, Veil encountered an opponent who was also a transcendent. With a long and short rapier in hand, she finished the fight in less than 2 minutes. In the end, her opponent kneeled on the ground, riddled with wounds on both legs, while her snow-white combat suit didn't even have a speck of dust on it. A beautiful fight, although due to the lack of an explosive situation, the reaction it provoked was not even a tenth of his own. But judging from her displayed strength, as long as she didn't face him, she was likely to make it far. Well, scratch that thought. When Fu Qian stood in the arena for the 3rd time, he shook his head as he looked at Veil opposite him. He didn't believe in such coincidences. With so many contestants, the 2 most dramatic performers meeting in the 3rd round, there'd be hell to pay if this wasn't a fix. Of course, Fu Qian wasn't going to waste his time questioning the fairness of the draw, as it made no difference to him who he faced. Besides, he had already anticipated the answer this bunch might give. There was no rule saying backstage manipulation was forbidden. Veil also looked helpless, but she seemed to want to struggle a bit more. After politely bowing, she positioned her rapiers one in front and one behind, watching Fu Qian with vigilance. Begin. Apparently because Fu Qian was present, the referee skipped the countdown this time and simply announced the start before jumping to the corner. As he announced the start, the blonde made her attack. It must be said that her strength was quite good, and her swordsmanship even felt stunning. The gleaming rapier in her hands turned into flecks of cold light, a long and a short one covering each other, each move aimed at vital spots. Contrary to what many people thought, although they looked slender, most rapiers were not light, and those without training would find them hard to wield. The woman in front was obviously the type who had immersed herself in swordsmanship for a long time. Her delicate movements and reasonable way of applying force, combined with a transcendent speed and strength, gave the impression that the two rapiers in her hands were utterly invincible. Her left and right motions provided an impeccable defense of her body. A very upright and honorable style of swordsmanship. Fu Qian nodded inwardly. Such true technique-oriented players were rare, and she could be considered a valuable practice opponent. Although his style was to overpower with brute force, he always held a reverence for technique-oriented fighters. Therefore, Fu Qian did not choose an overpowering fighting style but tried to slow down his pace, matching her speed. It was only when their speeds were close that he could appreciate the terror of this technical style. At first, it was fraught with danger, and several times he almost got his head pierced by the sharp blade. After narrowly avoiding these attacks, Fu Qian swiftly adjusted his body, trying not to rely purely on speed, but seeking to dodge in the most sensible way. Soon, the thug's excellent control over his body took effect, and the rapiers, with their whistling through the air, could no longer get close to him. A minute later, Fu Qian simply closed his eyes, relying purely on his hearing to discern. Since becoming a transcendent, his senses had greatly enhanced, but he had never really taken the time to develop them. Trying this today, he felt a refreshing change. By now, Vale had gone from aggressive attacking to finally starting to run out of strength, slowing down her pace. However, just after her short sword was dodged by Fu Qian again, an ice-blue ray shot out from the tip of the blade, instantly enveloping the surroundings with an icy chill. Indeed, she still had a trump card. With a vast gap in strength, she knew to feign weakness, conceal her trump card, and then strike when least expected, hoping for a miraculous effect. It had to be said that she was a master in both technique and psychology. But that was as far as she would go. With an extremely twisted movement, Fu Qian dodged this long-prepared killer move. The ice-blue beam hit a corner of the ring, exuding cold air and forming a large patch of white frost. I concede. Witnessing this scene, Vale finally stopped, face full of despair, and surrendered, panting heavily. Afraid that he would strike to kill. Well, that might be the case, he had left quite an impression on everyone during the last match. Before Fu Qian could make a move, the relieved referee promptly declared him the winner and ran off. The spectators who had been hoping for him to smash a second arena were greatly disappointed, and a buzz of disapproval filled the air. In that moment, Fu Qian snorted and looked up, glaring at the loudest section of the crowd, his gaze icy cold. If he remembered correctly, killing spectators didn't break the rules here. Of course, he wasn't so cruel, but the audience didn't know that. Indeed, in the span of a breath, that part of the stands fell silent. Chapter 85, Chapter 85, Chapter 84, King of the White Tower, Part 6_1. Chapter 85, Chapter 84, King of the White Tower, Part 6_1. Having successfully intimidated the audience, Fu Qian left the stage with satisfaction. Would you like to rest now? The female priestess approached him cautiously and asked. Can I go back now? Yes, your 3 rounds of competition for tonight have ended. You just need to go back and wait for tomorrow's arrangements. Of course, you can also stay and watch the rest of the other competitors' matches before leaving. It might be a bit of a trouble, the contestants on the stage were in the thick of the battle. Not many cherished their time as he did, and it would probably take a while to finish. Understood. Fu Qian looked up at the stands where Bai Jinting was and noticed that in addition to the King of the White Tower, there was an old man with red hair and a beard, wearing a fine robe. Even from this distance, he could still feel a strange oppressive force, as if there was a congealed thunderstorm sitting there. Was this the legendary demigod Ibu? This was the first time Fu Qian had seen someone of this level. Indeed, as the information he had obtained said, high-tier transcendence represented a fundamental change in the nature of life, and this one gave him a sensation completely different from any previous opponent. It seemed that this individual was the biggest threat to his current mission. At this distance, in fact, if it weren't for him, he might even consider charging straight at him. But there was no need to rush. After today's competition, he had undoubtedly entered the target's field of vision, and he could slowly look for opportunities later on. Taking today's exhaustion into account, there was no need for rest. As Fu Qian stood by the window gazing out, there was a knock at the door. Fu Qian opened the door to find his defeated subordinate standing outside, her figure seductive. Her snow-white bathrobe was loosely tied, and her not completely dried golden hair hung down her sides. Vale's complexion had already recovered. "May I come in?" Her voice had a faintly weak softness to it. "Yes." Fu Qian nodded, opening the door to signal for her to come in. Knocking on the door in a bathrobe, Vale's demeanor was in stark contrast to her prior performance, full of dissonance. Her coming to him after losing the match was unlikely due to Stockholm Syndrome. Fu Qian was a bit curious about her purpose in visiting. With light steps, Vale walked into the room, found a seat, and sat down. She casually flicked the hem of her bathrobe, crossing and lifting her bare legs. "You fought very well today." "I gave it my all, yet I still couldn't even touch the hem of your garment." "I've never felt this kind of helplessness since I was little." As Vale's smile started to waver upon receiving Fu Qian's expressionless, dismissive responses, she gritted her teeth. "Actually, I'm having a bit of trouble sleeping." Fu Qian raised an eyebrow. "Could it be you want to sleep with me?" "Could I?" Vale's face flushed, her gaze fixed directly on Fu Qian. "You could, but I charge a hefty fee." Vale's expression froze in an instant, her face alternating between red and pale, and after a prolonged silence. "Actually, there is something else I would like to ask of you. Not only do you want to sleep with me, but you're also asking me to do something for you. Isn't it a bit much to make two requests at once?" Fu Qian frowned as he looked at her. "No, that's not what I meant." Vale's voice started to stammer. "Then what do you mean?" Vale bit her lip, realizing that her attempt at seduction was ineffective, and promptly covered up her neckline. "If possible, I hope you can help me find someone." She clearly had a special purpose for her visit. Fu Qian nodded. "Who is it?" "My sister, she's somewhere in the archipelago." "Then why don't you go find her yourself?" "I've already been eliminated, now I can only stay in this place." Vale gave a bitter smile. "Once the competition is over, I'll have to leave. And you, as the victor of the first day, have already been granted access to the inner island." Vale sighed deeply, her expression full of sorrow. "Are you blaming me? You have to own up when you're outplayed. Did you come here just to find her?" "Yeah." Vale nodded. "We had some disagreements, and she left home alone not long ago. I've done a lot of investigating and confirmed that she should be here. Considering the situation here, I'm a bit worried and want to find her as soon as possible." Concern is natural. Fu Qian recalled the crazed audience in the stands and expressed a great deal of understanding for Vale's emotions. In some ways, she's really unlucky. Having strong abilities and being just one victory away from entering the inner island to find her sister, she then ran into him. Indeed, behind-the-scenes manipulation kills. But he had gained a lot today, and she had played a part in his sparring practice. As someone reasonable, if he could lend a hand along the way, it wouldn't be a problem. Fu Qian nodded. "I can keep an eye out." "That would be great." Vale's spirits lifted, and she took off a pendant from around her neck and handed it over. "I'm not sure if she'll use her real name, but she looks a lot like me. This has her picture on it. If you see her, please pass it to her and tell her that I and everyone at home are really worried about her and hope she comes back soon." "What if I don't find her? How should I return this to you?" Fu Qian received the pendant, still warm from her touch. "I'll be here these next few days." Vale sighed deeply. "If by then you find I'm not around, then never mind." Not long after Vale left, a knock came at the door again. Fu Qian opened the door, and this time there was a man outside, his face beaming with a smile. "Your performance today was truly impressive." "That praise sounds familiar." Fu Qian frowned, warily eyeing the man. "If you come at me with, 'I can't sleep,' don't blame me for lashing out." "I am Ji Ping, and I apologize for disturbing your rest," said the man named Ji Ping with a polite apology. I'm here mainly to extend an invitation." As he spoke, he handed over an envelope. "The Rebirth Club welcomes your presence anytime." Fuqian took the envelope, noticing the gray and white eyeball in Ji Ping's palm rotating as his hand moved, a likely indication of some special creature's body part here. Ji Ping did not stay long and quickly left after setting down the item. Fuqian opened the envelope he held, taking out a serpent-shaped badge made of some special material that felt heavy and even warm to the touch. It seemed that today's highlight performance was effective. Visitors were lining up at his door. This Rebirth Club, he wasn't sure what they were about, but since they came forward with friendly intentions, there was no reason not to use this opportunity to gather some information and prepare for the next move. Of course, the most ideal scenario would be if a third person knocked on his door soon, with Bai Jinting coming to him themselves. Part 5 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.